Okay, we're going to call this Tuesday, July 7th council meeting to order. If the clerk would please call the roll.
Councilmember Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Roshino Farrell.
Here.
Mayor Josh Amato.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Councilmember Michael Boyer.
Here.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Debbie Treen.
Here.
Thank you very much. Councilmember O'Farrell, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Lamb, could you please read the land acknowledgement statement?
We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Up next, we have public comment. You'll have 3 minutes to give your public comment. If you have anything you'd like to pass out to the council as part of your public comment, please deliver it to the clerk. I will call people up 3 in a row. If you are able, you are welcome to stand behind the podium to get ready. 3 minutes and state your name and city of residence. And when we get to the 3-minute mark, I'll start to talk you off the podium. Up first, we have Jillian Wallace, then Stephanie Rudat, followed by Sasha Stevens.
Thanks. Jillian Wallace of the historic town of Inglewood. And tonight I would like to thank the city of Sammamish for their proclamation in support of Disability Pride Month. Wait, another rainbow pride flag? But what does this one mean? Red represents physical disabilities. Yellow represents neurodivergence. Green represents sensory disabilities. Blue represents psychiatric disabilities. White represents the invisible and undiagnosed disabilities. The stripes move diagonally across the black of mourning to represent navigating obstacles of illness, violence, and ableism, like stereotypes and social prejudice, but also to celebrate being able to move across barriers. And that's why each July we come together to honor the achievements of the disabled community, both the people who have disabilities and the allies who continue to work so hard to make space. But why July? To celebrate the founding of the American with Disabilities Act, or ADA, in 1990. So that's less than a decade older than Sammamish. So let's reclaim the narrative and challenge the idea of what disability and accommodations look like. IDEA as in Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That having a disability is not something to be ashamed of. Everyone is going through something that influences their actions and decisions. So please don't devalue someone's decision-making skills or autonomy based on disability or what you think you might see. Instead, approach every interaction with respect, patience, and kindness. Yep, that even applies when interacting with with city council members. This is for everyone. As a parent and caregiver, I work to ensure the community the children experience life through is a safe space to learn and grow. By using my community influence, like National Neighborhood Night Out, first Tuesday evening in August, I can shape the space of our neighborhood. Our neighborhood kids run in a pack of acceptance and inclusion, and that transfers to the elementary neighborhood playground, which in turn transfers to the school building culture. And as a member of the school equity board meeting, I can learn and continue to promote that safe space as a member within the community and the school building. A safe space for kids to have big feelings, learn, and feel supported. The community kids take this kindness learned from school back home with them to share with their families. Then when we all meet at the neighborhood grocery store farmers market, where everyone is demonstrating a patient and inclusive community, we're all just neighbors being kind and inclusive and accepting of all humans together. Thankfully, Kindring works right here in Sammamish to promote an inclusive community by starting with the kids. So thank you for your continued support of Kindring services, because the world works better with everyone together. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Up next, we have Stephanie, then Sasha, and then Samantha Toll.
Hi, Council. It's been a long time. I'm Stephanie Rudat. It was recently brought to my attention that at the last meeting in June, the 16th, Councilmember Stewart made a false claim about my husband, former emergency manager of Sammamish. He left his role in working for the city back in 2021 when he then became the the emergency manager for not just Sammamish, but all of the cities Eastside Fire and Rescue represent. He served under Chief Clark and under Chief Lane while he was there, working alongside former city manager Scott McCall. After the city and EFR led the region's response to COVID-19 with great success, Andrew presented a long-awaited evacuation study to the council in late 2022. From that point onward, emergency management was relatively deprioritized by council. Scott had marginalized Andrew since that time, and at the end of 2022, Lane was also punishing Andrew for publishing that report. All he was doing was notifying the city and the public of the city's vulnerabilities in a disaster, specifically regarding evacuation, and getting services onto the plateau in a catastrophic disaster. Later, because he actually wants to use his skills and do a job, he left his role at EFR and took a position with one of the nation's big cities. Sadly, in February of 2024, my husband, Andrew Stevens, had his service-connected cancer return, and it had metastasized. We were told that odds of him surviving were quite low. Ultimately, however, it was the chemo, not the cancer, that nearly took his life. By that summer, in June and July of 2024, my husband was on the most advanced form of life support at a CV ICU in Seattle for several months. Months later, and after a lot of work, I was able to have my husband medevaced to Chicago, where he was granted a bilateral lung transplant. Shortly thereafter, the bomb cyclone struck, and my son will continue.
Give us just a moment to get the time reset for you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I am Sasha Stevens, and I would like to yield my time to my stepmother, Stephanie Rudat.
I'm sorry, we don't allow that in our council, so if you could just read the statement.
Continue reading right here. You can start there.
Imagine
Thank
this
you.
is from her words. While my husband was in pulmonary rehabilitation at the transplant hospital in Chicago, the city faced the historical bomb cyclone. Last month, Stewart chose to recklessly, dishonestly, and maliciously publicly claim that my husband, Andrew Stevens, was responsible for the city's allegedly poor response. I do not know why there was an urge to disrespect my husband, a public servant, years after he's even worked there. I'm here to clear the record and will keep coming back if this nonsense continues. Pam, it appears you continue to be relentless in your mission to cause harm to anyone who has ever publicly disagreed with you, elevating disagreement to virtual without a second thought. Stop. It's so unhelpful. All of you electeds on the daily dais are politicians supported by dedicated, hardworking, highly capable public servants. As politicians, you have a unique opportunity to behave like public servants. I cannot encourage you more to seize this very special chance. You were selected to serve. Please, for the sake of our community, act like it.
Thank you.
We're talking about my father, by the way. Thank you.
Up next, we have Samantha Toll, then Felicia Chang, and then Mary Wichter.
I hate being here. I hate public speaking so badly. I'm here today to discuss the survey that was put up a few weeks ago regarding city taxes and city services. The survey aimed for the residents of Sammamish had the best option of keeping the 6% utility tax while reducing services. The other two options were all about raising taxes. I'm here today to remind you that some of the council members here ran on the platform against utility tax. Deputy Mayor Treen specifically mentioned during an election debate that she led the team who recommended the 6% utility tax, but she was not allowed to make any adjustments to the budget itself. However, this survey that we're seeing is just the opposite of that. There was no accountability regarding the question of why we needed another tax. You have not been clear about why budget cuts were not offered and why city manager still gets the highest salary out of all city managers in Washington state. I'm sorry, I really hate public speaking, oh my God.
It's okay.
I'm here today to remind council members who were elected to keep their campaign promises and to look into the budget and find ways to cut it. Do not impose more taxes on us. You're making Sammamish unaffordable to us living here. You're making it impossible for families to raise their kids in this beautiful city of ours. A friend of mine suggested to make the 120 building somewhat of a family fun center, a place where you can go bowling, watch movies, and have many activities such as escape rooms. When Redmond and Issaquah are offering these options, but Sammamish doesn't, our residents are going into Issaquah and into Redmond and are paying taxes to their cities. Redmond and Issaquah are benefiting from it with our income and taxes. And there is no logical reason for us not to have those centers as well. This can create a cash flow for us. I'm here today to ask you to do the hard thing and to prefer us and keep your campaign promises to us over taking the easy way out with taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Felicia, then Mary, and then Celia Wu.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Felicia Chiang, and I am a rising senior at Skyline High School. I am here on behalf of Lens of Youth, a youth-led nonprofit that shares real-life stories to build understanding and acceptance of neurodiversity. Today, we're so grateful for the city's support of our Misunderstood Moments program, which brings these stories into the community and encourages action. Actually, one of the stories we shared is about a young woman whose unique way of connecting with people brought strangers together. Her openness in starting conversations created wonderful interactions and helped others see the world from a different perspective. Her story reminds us that inclusion is not only about providing support, but also about recognizing the unique strengths, perspectives, and contributions that people with disabilities bring to our community every day. That message is reflected in this year's Disability Pride Month theme, The World Works Better With Us. It reminds us that when people with disabilities are included, valued, and given opportunities to contribute, our entire community becomes stronger. Besides July being Disability Pride Month, it marks the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, reminding us that inclusion takes ongoing effort from everyone. So as we recognize this month, I want to thank the City of Sammamish for supporting our Art Bridge and Music Bridge programs through art grants. These free monthly classes give people of all abilities a place to express themselves, build confidence, make friends, and share their creativity. Our participants and their families are truly grateful for these opportunities. Thank you for helping Sammamish become a more welcoming and inclusive place for everyone. To continue celebrating Disability Pride Month, Lens of Youth will be hosting a booth at the Sammamish Farmers Market tomorrow and July 29th, where we'll be sharing stories and ways to support the neurodivergent community. We invite community members as well as the mayor and council to stop by, learn more, and celebrate Disability Pride Month with us. And I want to thank this council for also issuing a proclamation for this month. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Up next, we have Mary, then Celia, and then Swan Jacobson.
Good evening, Council. Mary Victor, Sammamish for 25 years. On tonight, on your unfinished business pages 50 through 58, you have your council goals again. And what I'd like to say is, you've already heard people say that there isn't a way to get more money. The way to get more money is to do the housing that we need. The housing that we need is not just the negotiated growth amount that you have of 2,000 or 2,100. It's really time to look at what do we have for our internal needs. Those are the things that have not been met. You've heard Paul Stickney speak to this a lot, and occasionally I divert from my usual topics for it. You have internal growth needs. Wouldn't it be nice if we had some houses that were $175,000 to $500,000 to purchase, or from $500,000 to $1 million or $1.2 million? We have an overabundance of houses at like $1.5 million and higher. We have a lot of the more rich homes, and we were about 85% single family home and about 15% multifamily. And actually some of that we actually got when we annexed Klahani, so you're taking Klahani's numbers and not building yourself. And the way to get those things is you need to work on the town center rezoning, but you need to have the numbers. So I believe with your council goals tonight, it's really high time to plan for this internal growth that you need. It's not about bringing new people in or building. It's about building the stuff that people who live here, work here, want to stay here and play here, that they can do. So I'm not as good on housing as Paul Stickney is. He writes a lot, but I read his email that he sent in today, and particularly the A part in the green boxes. I wrote these notes from. So I'm hoping that you will be bold and try to do something to say that the housing that we need, the internal numbers would be fixed. Maybe you won't get the numbers right away and you'll be able to adjust them. There's also places you can get them from. But if we just don't do it, we're just going to continue growing. And I also done the water and sewer district at Sammamish Plateau meetings for 10 years. When we were growing some, there was revenue. And then when we aren't growing so much, there's hardly any revenue, and they've had to come up different ways. And now you've got the utility tax on top of that. So I'll yield the remainder of my time, but I hope that you'll work on housing goals and actually trying to do some of the things Mr. Stickney has said over and over and over, and would probably speak by Zoom tonight, I imagine. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Celia, and then Swan, and then James Eastman.
Good evening. I wanted to read the email that I had sent to Councilmember Stewart directly last year. I still intend to do that, but first, tonight, this council and this community deserve to understand what the court actually ruled. Councilmember Stewart publicly stated that a federal judge found I violated citizens' First Amendment rights. That is not true. Here are the facts. The city of Sammamish considered its Facebook page a limited public forum. Comments had to stay on topic. Off-topic comments had to be removed. Many cities still follow this policy nationally. When a comment was removed as off-topic, my colleague took pains to explain why. In fact, she explained in writing to one of the plaintiffs before the lawsuit was filed why her comment was deleted, citing the rule concerning content not related to the article being commented on. She ended the email the way she always did. We are always here to help answer any questions. I'm going to attach that correspondence to this public comment. The court's concern was never that off-topic comments were deleted. The problem was that we didn't consistently delete all of them. Out of the thousands of comments made in a year and a half of the city's Facebook page, the plaintiff's attorneys found 9 off-topic comments that had not been removed. We were 2 human beings, the communications team that didn't work 24/7, manually reviewing comments to see if they were on or off topic. And it was this inconsistency that we didn't delete these 9 off-topic comments that the judge ruled we weren't carrying out this off-topic policy consistently. And so that is why the city changed its policy. Quoting from the city's Facebook page, a federal judge had ruled that such a rule would need to be applied consistently to comply with the First Amendment, so consistently as to be an unreasonable administrative burden. So those are the facts of the case, Councilmember Stewart. The records already showed that Sarah Howe Kimsey's charges were false. Her comments were not deleted or hidden. The preliminary injunction was about the city's Facebook limited public forum policy, which the city changed. The case was settled. There was no trial, there was no final ruling, and there was never, not in any order, not anywhere, a finding that I or anyone else violated anyone's First Amendment rights. I am a journalist. I am a professor of journalism. I teach the First Amendment. When an elected official tells this community that a judge found me in violation of constitutional rights, that strikes at the heart of my profession and my reputation. Knowing the facts and yet still refusing to correct this falsehood is malicious. This is my 6th time at the podium, and I will keep coming back until the record is corrected. Thank you so much for listening tonight.
Swan, and then James.
Hello, City Council, and let me adjust this a little. Hello, City Council, and welcome to our new interim city manager. My name is Swan, Spanish resident of 12 years. Disability is often spoken about in the context of awareness and support. So with this month focusing on it, why is it about Disability Pride? Why not Disability Awareness Month? This is a question I asked myself not as a challenge, but to expand my horizons and thoughts with it. There's a term that floats around. I don't like the term differently abled. If some people do, that's fine. But what I do like is celebrating everyone's unique, different experiences through life. Homogeny is not our goal, nor our friend. Now, when it comes to disability and pride, do I enjoy spending most mornings putting gel caps on my eyes, contact lenses, so that I can see without glasses? Not really. I'm going to be honest, some of you are blurry right now. But I do know that my challenges with vision have given me a different way of appreciating the beauty of the world around me, and I take pride in that. Do I enjoy my feet hurting after just a few minutes of walking? They hurt right now, even with ibuprofen or custom shoes. Not really. But I do have a deep appreciation for the support of my friends who've come together to help make it possible for us to go to events together, and I take pride in that. Do I enjoy how hard it can be to maintain focus on tasks or remember things that are important to other people? Not really, but I do love the ways in which my brain can jump between ideas and make connections, and I take pride in that. Just like queer pride, disability pride is about normalization of being disabled. We don't stare at or avoid looking at people with glasses, at least once we're past the elementary school schoolyard. And it should be the same for people in wheelchairs or little people or people with heavy scarring or speech impediments or whatever else is different about the way they experience the world. It's fine for people to be different. It's even fine to take notice of those differences. Just don't stop there. Jillian said that very well. When we support people with disabilities, we make our world better around us. When we hide or stifle disabled people's voices, we lessen the ways we can improve the world. Disabilities change and sometimes limit the ways that I can interact. They can be, well, disabling sometimes. They do not define me, but they are a part of my definition. Thank you for the chance to speak.
Thank you for your comments. James.
James Eastman, East Lake Sammamish Parkway. I'd like to welcome our new interim city manager. I saw, I don't know, somewhere in your resume or online or whatever, I saw that it said Bend, Oregon, and I thought to myself, man, I think one of my all-time favorite Sammamish city managers was from there, and he was interim too. His name was Larry Patterson. He was like 7 or 8 years ago. So I don't know if you know Larry, but if you don't, you still have a great effect on the city as interim person, just not having a dog in a fight and having excellent decorum. So, my day job is pretty boring. I schedule massive construction projects, like tens of thousands of line items, and put them in order, like an instruction manual. And when somebody slows down or they screw up, I go reorganize them all. When I'm doing that, I'm looking at a screen, and usually there's 5 or 6 superintendents or project managers sitting around here telling me how they want to do it, and they resequence everything, and I'm just banging away at my computer, and I say, okay, we'll do this first, and we'll do this second, and then we'll come over here, and we'll do this instead, and then I slam on my F9 key, and my F9 key calcs my whole schedule. And if I slam on the key and I don't hear a sound, like, I'm good. But if I slam on my F9 key and I hear ding, that means I have a loop in my schedule. And everyone's watching and it's embarrassing. So I quickly look at the top of my loop and I look at the very bottom of the 1,000-item list, and I see that, you know, these activities are tied to each other, and I hurry and I break the tie and do some magic, and I hit it again. And, I continually do that until there's no more dings in the schedule calc. So in Excel, it's called a circular reference. And I wish there was something as easy for you guys when you guys pass code to get all the contradictions out of the code before you pass it. Because once you pass it and it contradicts, builders, developers, they just stay away from contradicting code because there's uncertainty. So this new 1750, it's awesome. I think it's really going to do the trick for the low-income housing fee, incentivize smaller housing. The Planning Commission's done a great job. I know a lot of you guys have already watched that. It's a lively debate, a lot of good points. But let's remember the whole premises for that was because we had House Bill 1110, which allowed multiple units on each lot, which gave us the right to ask for a low-income housing fee. Which is also tied to a middle housing FARs, which governs size on a lot. But ultimately, we just came back and we said cottage housing is 1,500 square feet. That's as large as you can do. But now we're changing to 1,750. But if you look in tonight's agenda, it doesn't reference changing cottage housing limit up to 1,750. So we got to do that. We got to up the cottage housing limit, or we're just going to contradict our new code and people won't use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody online for pre-written public comment?
We do. Per the
Pre-registered.
reasonable accommodation, those who have pre-registered and would like to provide online comment, please raise your hand at this time. Promoting our first public commenter. Mr. Stickney, when you're ready.
Good evening, City Council. Paul Stickney. Sammamish enjoyed all the speakers tonight. And yes, I am going to be talking about internal housing and just go over a couple of the high points from the email cover I sent today, the policy change, and some sources that I used to come up with my opinion on what housing needs were based on quantified factors. So I'll get into that a bit. But the reason to do this, the number one reason, isn't fiscal. It's to have housing supplies that meet local economic and demographic and workforce needs over time. We don't have that. The other notable reason is because there are pretty massive annual and one-time revenues for the city that would greatly lessen the need to raise taxes or cut services and probably reduce the utility tax or eliminate it. And there's a plethora of low impact, net positive, enduring, holistic enrichments for the entire community. So I suggest you take a look at the suggestions on the housing goal. And I'm going to summarize those only. I made sort of three-part suggestion to the housing goal. One is policy, which is to, in the first priority, add a sentence to plan to actualize our negotiated regional growth target, local appropriately set internal housing balance targets, and requisite and important environmental protections. Do all three. Under the work plan item, I outlined a summary of what I've been saying recently about how to quantify housing need factors, contrast consequences if they are met or not, which are very disparate, share with the public and get input, and then decide whether as a community we add internal balance. I'll spit out the T. Target numbers. I can't talk. I'll get back on track. Anyway, there are four major areas that I'm going to share in a future email of where quantified housing factors came from that I used to interpret in my research. And I'll send these to you. One was in early February of 2024 about the homegrown housing plan. Another was in the fall of 2024 dealing with the comp plan. Another was in May of 25 with Planning Commission groups, and the last in January of 15. I will send these to you, and you can take a deep dive and snoop around. Appreciate the chance to speak. Thank you.
That's all for online public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'd like to pull an item from the consent calendar.
Which item would you
Item
like to pull?
4 for a brief discussion about the overlay projects.
Okay, so item 4, contract for the 2024 overlays. We can move that to item 13 under new business. Mr. City Manager, any concerns with that?
Can you confirm what item, I may have it, my mayor's copy has it as item 4?
Item 5.
Item 5, thank you. That's the one I'm.
Great. Okay, our mayor's copy has different numbers. So we are pulling the contract 2026 overlays. We're moving it to new business, the second item in new business, and we will align the numbers at some point.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, we now have the Disability Pride Proclamation. Councilmember Boyer, would you please read that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Disability Pride Month 2026. Whereas observed each July, Disability Pride Month honors the diversity, culture, and contributions of people with disabilities. It is time to increase visibility, challenge stereotypes, and recognize experiences and achievements of individuals with disabilities. And whereas this year's theme, The World Works Better With Us, was chosen by the ARC's National Council of Self-Advocates, a national council led by people with disabilities. The theme affirms a powerful truth. When people with disabilities are fully included and supported, entire communities thrive. Inclusion strengthens our schools, workplaces, healthcare systems, transportation networks, and public spaces. And whereas Disability Pride Month recognizes disability as a natural and valuable part of human diversity, not something to be hidden or changed, it encourages people to take pride in their identities while fostering greater understanding and belonging throughout our communities. Observances often include pride events, educational initiatives, advocacy efforts, and community gatherings. And whereas the benefits of disability inclusion are evident in everyday life, innovations inspired by accessible designs such as curb ramps, closed captioning, audiobooks, and voice-to-text technology have improved daily life for millions. What begins as accommodation often becomes a universal benefit, supporting families, commuters, students, workers, and countless others. Now, therefore, Josh Amato, as mayor of the city of Sammamish, does hereby proclaim July as Disability Pride Month. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, the council is going to pause and we're going to present the proclamation to Jillian Wallace. If we could all please get up and stand by the flag, we'll get a quick photo as well. Thank you.
Is he going to be talking into him? Okay. Is he going to talk at the table, mic one? He'll be at the podium. So he'll use the podium mic. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right, up next, we have the oath of office and introduction of our interim city manager, Parks, and our city clerk will do the swearing in here for us.
We can just turn the mic on. We'll just, if you want to stand here, then we can
Stand right here.
You can stand here so that you can speak into the mic. Yep.
Got it.
Okay, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your full name.
A. Andrew Parks,
Having been duly appointed
having been duly appointed
to the office of interim city manager
to the office of interim city manager
for the city of Sammamish,
for the city of Sammamish,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
perform the duties of my office
perform the duties of my office
as prescribed by law and to the best of my ability.
as prescribed by law and to the best of my abilities,
That I will support and maintain
that I will support and maintain
the laws and Constitution of the United States of America
the laws
and
and
Constitution,
Constitution of the United States of America,
the state of Washington,
the state of Washington,
and the ordinances of the city of Sammamish.
and the ordinances of the city of Sammamish.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just a few brief words, if I could. I mean, one, thank you for the opportunity to help this community, you and the community, to advance and address your goals, put together a budget, and position the next city manager for success in this community to move forward. To James's comment earlier, yeah, I didn't know Larry Patterson, know him very well. Larry was a mentor. Was his assistant city manager, CFO for a number of years, and truth be told, I was the bad guy, he was the good guy. So I enjoy the opportunity to be the good guy as opposed to the bad guy. So I appreciate the opportunity again, look forward to working with all of you.
Well, thank you very much for helping us out here. We really appreciate it. Up next, we have our introduction of our new police chief, Myers. If you'd like to come forward to the podium, and yeah, thank you very much for being here.
Well, I want to certainly thank the community and council for the opportunity to serve as your new chief of police. And I'll share just a bit of my background. Was born and raised here on the east side, so serving here in Sammamish feels very much like home. And yeah, grew up in Redmond. After graduating, went to Western, where I earned a degree in business administration with a concentration in finance, and then would come back and spend about 10 years in the private sector, most of that working in traffic management and logistics with Genie Industries. So the east side is truly home. It was around that time that I started serving as a member of the Redmond Community Police Advisory Board. And that's where I really got what I would say is a different perspective on public safety, seeing creative ways that they were engaging with the community. And it really opened my eyes to how public safety and law enforcement can really work and come in partnership with community. Having grown up here, there was an affinity certainly for the sheriff's office and all that they were doing. With a degree in business, I was attracted to their contracting model and the idea that we could serve both an unincorporated King County and then also our contract partners. And that's what would initially bring me here to Sammamish. I was part of our initial hiring and recruiting program. I would come here on a graveyard shift, and then Sergeant Anderson, who would ultimately become our undersheriff, introduced me to this community, and I got to see certainly the east side from an entirely different perspective. When I came out of the academy, the Criminal Justice Training Commission, I would return here. I joke that certainly my first call for service and my first report was written just a few yards away, and so Sammamish has really from day one for me been a city of firsts. I've been with the agency just over 18 years. They've been very generous, as is the communities I've served in, and giving me ample opportunity to grow and develop. Nearly all of my time has been either as a commander in administration or in contract cities, serving in Kenmore and then Shoreline, one of our largest contracts. Promoted up through sergeant, where I was able to serve with Sound Transit, and that gave me an opportunity to really see how we provide public safety and police services outside that normal municipal model. But I've always had a heart for our cities and coming back. A number of opportunities in our contract services division, so understanding how we serve communities like Sammamish, Shoreline, SeaTac, Metro, places like that, and where the contract model works. And I think that's been a tremendous advantage as I've had a chance to serve in a number of cities. I was a detective sergeant in our internal investigations unit, which provides me a good background to understand how our communities see us, and when there may be a concern about public safety or how those services are delivered, how do we in a thoughtful and responsible ways to our community address those. Media relations was another assignment. It gave me a chance to really see how we can in an authentic and genuine way share our stories with the communities. When I promoted to captain, I returned to Shoreline and I was now able to see it from a different position. It was one thing to be on patrol, but now to be on the other side and really understand how do we serve our officers, deputies, sergeants, and detectives in providing services to a very diverse community. Worked in our support services side. That was my most recent assignment, which was responsible for court security for our district and superior courts and managing property management and some other things. I think that's an important assignment because it's important to know how we both deliver services to the public and to our communities, but then how do we ensure that behind the scenes we're keeping the integrity of our evidence and our cases, really how an agency works. The opportunity to come back to Sammamish as your chief is really full circle. I think back to some of those very initial ride-alongs, those graveyard shifts of really seeing how a city works. And it's a tremendous opportunity. Again, I'm grateful certainly to you and to our community. It's a very special place, and I'm grateful to be here.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction.
Thank you.
And very impressed with your leadership style and look forward to working with you as our chief of police. Thank you. Up next, we have our unfinished business and ordinance creating renewing the Beaver Lake Management District Number 1 and the Beaver Lake Watershed. Audrey Starcy will be leading that conversation for us.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council. This is the third time we are back this year following the process outlined in the RCW for the renewal of Beaver Lake Management District. Joining me this evening is Jen Rubinelli. She has been leading this effort as well as attends all of the meetings for the district, and we are here to provide you an update on the vote results and ask that Council consider adoption of an ordinance this evening to continue the process. And we will be back after the August recess in the fall for more meetings about Beaver Lake Management District as well. So Jen, whenever you are ready.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. So good evening, Council. Jen Rubinelli, Management Analyst. So this evening, the meat of our presentation is going to be going over the public vote and the results of that vote. We also have a proposed ordinance for you tonight that is creating/renewing the Beaver Lake Management District Number 1 in the Beaver Lake Watershed. So just to recap, Washington State Law RCW 3661, Lake and Beach Management Districts strictly governs the renewal process. And we are going through the renewal process right now because the BLMD operates on 10-year cycles, and the current term ends December 31st of this year. So the Beaver Lake Management District Advisory Board and over 200 property owners within the current district are in favor of renewing. In March, we were in front of you for a presentation on all things BLMD, and you adopted a resolution to form/renew the BLMD. This was the kickoff, if you will, of the RCW process. And then we returned in May for a public hearing on the formation renewal, and you adopted a resolution submitting the question of creating/renewing the BLMD to owners of land. So that resolution submitting the question to owners of land, it called for a public vote for owners of land within the district boundary. This vote was conducted by the city. It was not conducted by the King County Elections Office. So ballots were mailed to all property owners within the Beaver Lake Management District on May 11th, and they were accepted through June 1st. So the RCW does have requirements on how the vote has to be tabulated. So every ballot received must be weighted to reflect the proposed dollar roll assessment amount for the new 2027-2036 term. So the proposed dollar amount for the assessment roll for a lakefront owner was $320. So that means that one lakefront owner ballot returned would be weighted by 320. Same goes for the non-lakefront owners. It is $33 per parcel in the proposed assessment roll. So that means that every ballot from a non-lakefront property owner is 33 votes. RCW also stipulates that a simple majority of votes cast moves the renewal process forward. So we received back 61 lakefront yeses, 133 non-lakefront yeses. This, when we weighed it by 320 for the lakefront votes and 33 for the non-lakefront votes, was 23,909 yeses. There were 5 lakefront no's, 62 non-lakefront no's. When we weight those and add them up, we got 3,646 no's. So the simple majority is in favor of renewing. So per the RCW, the ordinance tonight follows a successful vote in favor of renewal. So the ordinance, it acknowledges the vote results, it establishes the BLMD for 27 through 22 through 36, and there are public noticing requirements outlined in the ordinance. And then it sets us up for the next step in the RCW process, which is the assessment roll. And that is what we would be returning to you in September to present. I do want to note that there is a Scrivener's error on page 1 of the ordinance. It does state the incorrect 10-year term. So it states from calendar year 2027 through 2037. That does need to be corrected to state 2027 to 2036 before adoption. So if you approve the proposed ordinance tonight, the next steps in the process would be a public hearing on the proposed assessment roll for 2027-2036. We have that, I believe, planned for September 1st. And then we would be asking you to formally approve the assessment roll through another resolution. And then the last step, we promise, in this process would be to interview and appoint residents to the new term advisory board. The goal is to complete all of these steps by the end of 2026, just to ensure that there's no gaps in the BLMD service. All right, so we have a recommended motion for you, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, Council, any questions? Councilmember Stewart.
If there aren't any, I was going to go ahead and.
Beautiful. With that, you're it.
All right. I move to approve the proposed ordinance creating/renewing the Beaver Lake Management District Number 1 in the Beaver Lake watershed as amended to correct the 10-year time frame.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Stewart, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
All right. Any other council member? I see no lights on. With that, we will vote on the motion as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we are going to move on to another conversation about our council goals. I would like to offer Councilmember Boyer a chance to speak to the proposal he had sent around earlier to kick off this discussion. Everyone should have received that via email. So if there is no objection, what I would like to do is offer Councilmember Boyer 10 minutes to kind of speak to and talk through his proposed council goals for our consideration. Is there any objection? Okay, seeing none, Councilmember Boyer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for all of us reading what I sent out. I appreciate that. So there's kind of 3 sections I want to talk about. First of all is the process itself, then kind of the structure that we're going for, and then kind of what I submitted to everybody. In terms of the process, I guess I would say, and this is directed to all of us here that own this, that we should pursue a better methodology. You know, I believe that editing these past statements and wordsmithing from the dais is really inefficient. I think it's a really difficult way for us to go forward. Given our propensity to reduce discussion while on the dais, I recommend a subcommittee or something like that, either a committee of the whole or sub, and we can talk about that to give the goal set our full attention. Even to save time, we might want to pursue something like the JOT form that our deputy city mayor sent out manager sent out for the OPEX, and we gave our opinion. So we might gather some information that way. I had much higher hopes for our work in February, so I'm more or less proposing a deeper dive into that. It may be too late for this cycle to move it forward because we're already working on budgets and work items. So I'm wanting us to actually try again. In terms of the structure, I really look at these goals, as we all know, as SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. I don't see them as aspirational because it makes them really difficult for us to work with them. I think the vision that we have is aspirational, and that's already in the comp plan. I included that in the set that I sent out. I just cut and paste that from the comp plan as our vision for the city. I also think that these goals are our priorities, not priorities underneath that, and also limiting of two. So I think structurally that is difficult for me. I also believe that we are lacking a values beliefs section, which is really common amongst all the institutions that I run into. So we don't have that. So then we end up placing these values at goals. And in my opinion, it really makes them subordinate when they should permeate, influence, and direct all that we do. When we set items as goals that should be values, I do think we diminish their importance and effect. So I do think that we're missing some of that. What I sent to everybody was just one opinion. So I'm not one to point out problems and do nothing about it. So that's what I wrote. And I did that back in February, but we just have been meeting sequentially since then to try and move this forward. And in my opinion, we're struggling. So in my handout, I put out a mission. I cut and paste the vision from the comp plan. I wrote a value statement, followed by a goal set, definition of success, objectives, and metrics. So I thought, well, if we're expected to do all that, if I can't do that myself, then I'm not sure how we would even do that from the dais. So I don't expect what I wrote to carry through. That wasn't the intention. I never thought that would be the final set, but it kind of gives an example of what I'd like to see. The reason why I'm suggesting a subcommittee of some sort is because I think we owe work on this through deliberation and conversation. As an example, when we were doing this in February, I was sitting at a table talking about transportation with Councilmember Stewart. I wrote a sentence and she pointed out how some of it was pretty impractical and didn't make sense. And I completely understood that and was able to hear what she said and make an adjustment. That type of discourse here, I think, is really difficult to do. And I think we can find a better way. So I'm very interested in what my peers think and value, but I don't have a way to get that. And I'd like to have the clarity. So I will move that we form a council subcommittee of some sort to develop a goal set that we can use going forward and then take no further action on the set that we currently have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to create a council
second that.
subcommittee, and there's a second. Okay, Councilmember Boy, you kind of spoke to your motion, but do you have any final thoughts you'd like to add to your?
Yeah, the only final thought I have is that I would really enjoy working with my fellow council members to work through these issues through conversation and come to a conclusion. And I'm fearful that the way we're going at it right now, it might not turn out that way. So that's why I'm proposing a different approach. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Boyer. I have a question for staff, just really quickly, is that if we take this back and we go work on it and come back to you with a draft and then get your input on that and delay this, how does that impact you for the other work that we have to do? And I ask that just because I am, for the most part, very supportive of this, but I also understand if you need these goals now, we need to kind of find some interim path.
Okay, looks like I'm live. At the risk of upsetting a few people, I think it would be perfectly fine for you guys to go ahead and do that. The timeline I would ask for is if the subcommittee can move through this over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and it's something that we get council action on. I understand you have an August recess period. If that subcommittee could be meeting during July, finish that up, with staff, assistance if need be, during August, so that the first meeting that you have in September, we can get that, fully adopted. I think we can incorporate that in. I mean, just having those conversations with you during that timeline will help facilitate, as we, kind of put the budget together. I know the goal is to have the budget, a proposal to you, in September, incorporating those goals into that, I think would be highly desirable.
Yeah, and I think that, the very specifics where we get down to those measurable things will have to be something that we'll iterate on as a council or put a timeline on based on budget and work plan, because many of the things that I think we want to achieve, we can't expect staff to achieve those if we don't provide them with, the resources and the time to do so. So I support the idea of this. I'd actually like to volunteer to be on such a subcommittee with Councilmember Boyer, but I do think that will help to come up with something that hopefully everyone is comfortable with, because I think right now people are struggling, and I think this will potentially help. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I support this as well. I think it will help us kind of gel things for you. I know one of the issues is making sure that we have consensus on the council, and that's been a real struggle to do in discussions here in limited time and under pressure to make a decision. So I think having time to really take a deeper dive into the use of the goals and how we're going to implement them, and making them SMART goals as well. I noticed some of them are not. I also would like to serve on that committee. It's something I've done in many organizations and would love to contribute to.
Councilmember Lamb.
I just want to be clear, what exactly is this subcommittee going to be working on? Because in Councilmember Boyer's handout included Sammamish, a new vision statement, a new mission statement, council goals, council vision. So I'm not clear what will be the task for this committee. So if you could clarify that for Councilmember Boyer.
Yes, please.
I wrote those sections so that it would be comprehensive and that we could see a hierarchy. Although I'm not specifically wed that has to be that way, which is what I'd want the subcommittee to talk about. I do feel strongly that we should have a values statement present, and though if that precludes some of those goals, I would want the committee to talk about it. If it does not, then that too should work. What I'm looking for is if we can come up with a goal set and metrics and objectives, primarily those three, that we can gain consensus as a committee of the whole, that would be sufficient for me. If the council does want to have those other components, we can clearly do that. Again, I'm putting this out to the group as a starting point. If someone wants to offer an amendment for what's in there, I think that would be acceptable too. I didn't want to be overly prescriptive. I just wanted us to have some forward progress of something that would be useful to us.
Okay, so I am fine if there's a subcommittee working on goals. I'm fine if they work on values. I am not supportive of working on the Sammamish mission or vision statement. We spent 2.5 years working on the comp plan, and the comp plan includes our vision statement. We hired an external consultant to work on that at great expense for our comp plan. So I would only be in favor of working on those two components.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, and I agree with Councilmember Lamb. I wrote a vision just to have something. It wasn't that intentional. The vision statement that I put in there was directly from the comp plan. I just adopted it in completion. So I wasn't at all implying that we should adjust that. And so that's absolutely acceptable to me.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be in support of this too. Thank you, Councilmember Boyer, for suggesting and giving us a way forward on this issue. And I know it's been a stress on staff trying to decipher what it is that we mean. So I think it would be very helpful for staff and for the city, for all of us to kind of get together in this small committee framework to kind of get all this stuff on paper. So I look forward to the subcommittee's work. I'm not volunteering to be one of those people. I have full confidence in others who do. So thank you, Councilmember Boyer, for this great suggestion, and I'll be supporting the motion.
Okay, everyone on my screen here has spoken. I'm also going to be supportive of this. I've got, so far, it looks like 3 committee members who are interested, Boyer, Stewart, and Deputy Mayor. So once we're done, I think we can just, unless there's any opposition to that, that can be just the committee makeup. I don't see any objection to that. Okay, so I'll go back now to Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to amend the motion, but I think it would be important to ensure we had agreement and clarity, as you were saying, what the subcommittee could do. So I just jotted down that the subcommittee would begin with the approved comp plan vision statement and develop a proposed set of goals with SMART measurements, including the input from council from all of our previous meetings, which we have access to, and with staff to bring forward and discuss with the council as a whole in September. So I don't know if we have to formalize that, but if everyone's agreeable to that, that kind of defines our scope and the timeline.
Well, I guess I would like to be even more clear, because many times we walk away and we have been unclear of what we're going to come back with. So, Mr. Mayor, can I try that again, or am I out of order?
No, please. I do want to make sure this is right, because the wheels can come off of this quickly if I walk away thinking it was something different.
Yes.
So I do want to write it down and restate this motion here. I think it's important that we get this right from the jump.
Absolutely. So, I was wanting to write for us a value statement. That's a new thing. So that's part of the proposal. The goal set, and I think objectives, which is the how to the what, and then a metric set. So I'm throwing it out there to say we've got a value statement, a goal set with subsequent and associated objectives and metrics. And I'll add, we need to take no further. We need to take no further action on the goal set in front of us. That I think we appreciate everything that Mike and Rachel have done for us, but I think we're frustrating you with our activities, and I think we can help with that.
Okay, so Councilmember Stewart had written some notes, and I'm going to read them here. Good handwriting. Begin with the approved comp plan, vision statement, and develop a proposed value statement and set of goals with objectives and SMART measurements, including the
Inputs.
Thank you. Inputs from the council from previous meetings with staff to discuss with council in September. Does that, Councilmember Boyer? Okay. So I've read that. I've got several lights on that were on previously. I just want to get input from folks to make sure we're clear on.
I'll just, speaking to that, to say for the value statement, since that would be completely new, we can work with staff and the city attorney to see if we can collect input from the council via like a job form or something, so that, because that is brand new, and I think it would be important to hear from all 7 council members before we develop that. But I think that's a how, not a what, so.
Okay, so
Sorry for my cursive.
No, that's okay. All right, so we had an original motion on the floor. This would be an amendment to that motion that would override. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Okay. I'll move back to discussion. Councilmember Trine.
Thank you, Mayor. So on the amended motion, my assumption here is, so clarification that the goal set that's going to be produced, at least the way I look at it, it would be from the comp plan. We have plenty of goals and policies. That is a 20-year plan. And so what we're looking for, at least what I would be looking for, is a 2-year plan of the goal set that we'd be working on. So if that is the case, I'm in support of the amendment. Thank you.
Great. Okay. All right. So we have no other lights on. So we're going to hold a vote on the amendment and then on the main motion here. So all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Now a vote on the main motion. All those in favor of the main motion as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries 7-0. All right, and, come back to us with something. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we are now on to the council-initiated code amendments and a staff-initiated comprehensive plan policy language amendment led by David and Evan.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. David Pyle, Department of Community Development, while Evan Fisher, who serves as our Senior Management Analyst, is being promoted and is able to share screen. I'll go ahead and provide a brief introduction. We're here this evening to continue our conversation on 2 council-initiated code amendments and 1 staff-initiated code amendment that we bundled in with this process in order to address some comments we've heard from the community, and we think it would be a good addition. So I'll pass it off to Evan, and he'll provide a presentation, and we'd be happy to answer questions along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, and good evening, City Council and Mr. Interim City Manager. It's nice to meet you. Like David said, tonight we're revisiting 2 council-initiated code issues and 1 staff-initiated policy amendment to the comprehensive plan. The code issues are reevaluating the codified criteria for the quasi-judicial rezone process and looking at the list of exemptions to the city's inclusionary affordable housing program. The policy amendment is looking at if it would be appropriate to amend Land Use Policy 10.4 to remove the direction that the city pursue PSRC's designation as a regional growth center. The purpose and goals of tonight's meeting are to present to you the Planning Commission's recommendations, answer any questions you have, and ideally receive near finalish council direction on each of these topics. Big caveat, but that's fair. So we can prepare for a public hearing, which we have scheduled in 2 weeks on July 21st. As a brief project history, this work stems from a city-initiated docket item, which was which the council passed following the adoption of the comprehensive plan. This docket item was put in place so we can come and correct minor edits or improve implementation of the city's new policies and regulations. You can see the meeting dates we've had on this topic so far on the screen, and the ones to really focus on are April 14th, where the council reviewed these topics and asked the Planning Commission to provide a more narrow and refined analysis on some specific questions. On June 4th and 18th, the commission deliberated on these items and provided recommendations, which we'll go through in the next slides. So topic 1 is regarding critical areas and the criteria-based quasi-judicial rezones. As a reminder, this process allows property owners to change zoning when certain criteria are met. It provides opportunities for achieving higher densities for middle housing, and the quasi-judicial process is meant to be an objective court-like governmental proceeding to determine if criteria are met, and this is a type 3 process that is conducted by the city's hearing examiner. And on the right, you'll see a bit of the SMC and a highlighted line. This is really the line in question here regarding critical areas as part of the criteria. So the issue statement here is rezoning a property that is encumbered by critical areas appropriate? The policy questions the council asked the commission to focus on is, should properties encumbered by critical areas be eligible for this process? And is there an amount of the property that, if encumbered by critical areas and their buffers, would disqualify the property from rezoning? Currently, that amount is codified at 50%. One proposal was to look at 20%. The Planning Commission spent a decent amount of time deliberating this, came up with a few alternative scenarios, but ultimately landed on that, yes, the properties encumbered by critical areas should be eligible for the quasi-judicial rezone process, as they're protected not only by the city's critical areas rules, but the other criteria such as the buildable area requirements and the requirement that you can demonstrate sewer and water availability. And they thought, no, a percentage of a property being encumbered by critical areas should not disqualify the property from this process. The recommended code changes here are just simply striking that one part of criteria C and leaving the buildable area requirement in place. So the council's direction we're looking for here is, does the city council agree with the planning commission that properties encumbered by critical areas should be eligible for this rezone process, regardless of whether any percentage of the property is encumbered by critical areas? And from your eye, do the presented code changes seem ready for the public hearing on July 21st? And Mr. Mayor, I think it might make sense we'll go through each of these individually. So I'll stop here and turn it back to you.
All right, up first we have Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I want to first thank the Planning Commission. They were very thorough in all of these discussions. And certainly I feel like it was very informative in terms of the different perspectives. So I agree with their assessment here, because I do think we have done a great job as a city in recent years of increasing our requirements to make sure that we are protecting properties, whether how they're currently zoned or whether they're upzoned, to make sure that we aren't damaging any of those critical areas. We have lots of buffers, we have lots of other requirements. So I appreciate their recommendations and I agree with them. Thank you.
Councilmember Boyer.
Yes, thank you both. I know you've worked really hard on this. I've been to all of your meetings going through this, so great work. What I see on the screen, I support. Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
I also support the Planning Commission's recommendation. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Yes, I support the Planning Commission's recommendation on topic 1.
Deputy Mayor.
I guess I'll be the outlier here. I don't support it, and I think that we have already seen examples where rezones are being made on property that has sensitive areas, and it is, we have historically used the zoning as a way to protect land, and so they might be R1s now, so only one house could be built, and that was done partially to be sure we were protecting the sensitive areas. And I respect the improvements that have been made to our code on sensitive areas, but I also know that all it takes is an attorney and a pretty good consultant to demonstrate that they don't need to do that. So I won't be supporting this change.
I do have I have a question on this, kind of speaking to what Deputy Mayor was saying. This is going to be happening more and more within and without critical areas. So can you just, part of what I'm concerned about is the appearance that by removing this, we're removing protections for those areas. Now, if it is an R1, they could still build a house that could be just as damaging as building 2. So if you could please just talk a little bit to me about how this does or doesn't impact these areas, and if it would be possible to proactively message, if this change were to go through to the community, the protections that would be in place, even though this change may go through.
Yeah, excuse me. Great question. So there are, I think the easiest way to think about this is whether or not there are critical areas on the property, and whether or not it's R1, R4, R6, R8, which are all eligible zones under the neighborhood residential future land use designation in the city. The critical areas rules are the same. So whether or not you're in an R4 or an R6, your wetland buffer is not dependent on whether you're in an R4 or R6. It's dependent on the classification of the wetland. Whether or not there's a slope protection doesn't matter whether it's an R4 or R6. The protection is the same on the slope. Those protections are not dependent on what zone you're in. So changing a zone does not result in a diminishment of the protection that's applied to those identified critical areas on site, right? So where there is a change is in going from R1 to R4 to R6 to R8, there is a difference in the zoning controls that apply to the developable portion of the property. So, for example, if you had a wetland, let's say that was half encumbered by wetland and wetland buffer, and the other half was not encumbered by any critical areas, then you would be able to build out that portion that's unencumbered. In an R1 zone, you would be allowed 1 single-family residence if it was an acre. However, you'd be allowed 3 middle housing units to be built. In the R4, you would be allowed 4 dwelling units if you were able to make the density calculation work to grant those 4 units, or you would be allowed 12 middle housing units. In the R6, you would be allowed 6 units, or 6 single-family homes on that same acre of buildable area, or you would be allowed 18 middle housing units. And in the R8, you would be allowed 8 single-family units, or you would be allowed 18 middle housing units. So the issue I think that some have raised in the time I've heard this discussed is that it's the multiplication of units that could be located in the developable envelope that could result in some additional impact. That's one side of it. However, others see it as the same use. We're not changing the use. The residential is residential. So our zoning controls that we've adopted should do their job and should address the impacts that come from that. That's the other side of the perspective. It just depends on your perspective there. So with regard to the zoning control differences, it's not just the number of units. The primary jump is from R1 to R4, and that is primarily seen in the amount of tree retention that's required. Additional trees can be removed in the R4 as compared to the R1. There's a slight difference to the R6, but it's really minuscule, and that's not really discernible. There are also differences in the amount of hardscape that's allowed between the R1 and the R4, and there are also differences in the setbacks are different. There is no difference in the FAR. That is generally consistent across the zones. So really there are some different zoning controls at work that might result in an additional development footprint that could go in on a higher zone.
How does net density play into the middle housing?
Net density plays into middle housing by way of the density calculation in the same way that it plays into it for traditional single family.
So if half of your R4 is encumbered, you could only build half of the middle housing that would have been allowed? Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you all know, I'm a well-versed housing expert, so so I'm understanding the critical area ordinances and what that does, and the zoning controls and so forth. But now I'm very curious about the specific question that our deputy mayor asked, and I was wondering if you could respond to, her concern, because now you've got my curiosity of what that does to us, because I don't want us to do something and then regret it later. So, can you respond to that? That would really help me.
Can you restate the question?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just the fact that even though if we don't consider the critical areas part of it, that we often do not enforce what is drawn on the maps. So, and at the rezone level, there's not going to be consultant reports defining the critical areas. So we really don't know what is buildable and what isn't at that point. So it's only once it's rezoned that then there's a project that we start looking at the environmental impact.
So my understanding is that it is a submittal item regarding critical areas reports, and those are considered as part of rezone applications. And they do have to show and demonstrate that they have a certain percentage of the property or the lot size, the buildable lot area is available. So that is part of the process for evaluating compliance with the criteria. That is done at the point of the rezone. What we're not doing is running a mock-up of a potential development, which would be speculative through the development controls. I guess the difference really is, and I would say that I respectfully disagree that we don't apply our rules, because I think that's what I heard you say. I believe that we do apply our rules accurately to development, and we do a good job of that. So I would disagree with that. However, I think the biggest difference is in the difference in what the development footprint would look like on a site when you go from R1 to R4 to R6 to R8. And I'm not trying to diminish that. I'm, saying that out in the open here. I'm not advocating that properties be rezoned or not be rezoned. I'm simply trying to present the different sides of different perspectives at play here.
I've been involved in development for a long time, and I am concerned that this is going to take us down a path that we are going to have the typical unintended consequences, and there will be properties where sensitive areas exist, and we're going to end up building 12 units on half an acre or on an acre. We can't reverse it once we do it, and so once they have the rezone, we are living with whatever the outcome is, and I'm just concerned that we're not that we're being too aggressive in what we are allowing to be zoned.
Okay, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I just want to go back, David, to your R4 example, because I think your math was a little bit off. So you stated we have 1 acre that's half encumbered, and it's R1. You could build 1 unit on it. If you were to take it through and rezone it to an R4, you would not be allowed to build 4 units on that because of the net density calculation, correct?
You'd be able to build 2, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
So I just want to call that out, that our net density calculation does a lot to minimize impacts here, because we do quite aggressively take out that encumbered area from your ability to build. So you wouldn't, if you had an acre and it was half encumbered, you would not be allowed to build 12 units with the middle housing build if you rezoned it to R4.
6.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be that much. I also want to ask, it's my understanding that most of the R1 that we have in the city wasn't really designated R1 by the city or even by King County by any sort of reviewing and things. It was really kind of just a leftover from how things happened back when we were sort of the Wild West, just like the Inglewood Plat was just, they took a piece of paper and drew grids. They didn't really look at the land when they designated those zonings. Would that be an accurate statement?
I can't speak to that. I don't know the origin of the zoning of the city. I do know that upon incorporation, we did adopt the King County zoning map.
Right.
And that largely lived unchanged until just recently.
Correct. Okay. And then I believe the deputy mayor's concern that she stated was that with a good attorney, you could get out of complying with our critical area code, is what you said.
And consultant.
Okay. Well, an attorney, either way, I don't know that changes the meaning, but thank you for the clarification. I haven't ever heard of that. I mean, the only time that one can get out of certain regulations is when you file a reasonable use exception. And we wouldn't necessarily have that in this case, right? Because they wouldn't have an argument that we weren't allowing them a reasonable use. If they went from R1 to R4 and they could only build, 2 units instead of 4 because of net density, they still are allowed to reasonably use their land. So I don't know of any other examples of exceptions where a good consultant and a good attorney completely sidetracked any of our regulations.
Well, I go back to the fact that it doesn't matter if you're in an R1 or an R6, the critical areas rules are the same. So under either scenario, whether you rezone it or not, whether you have a good attorney and a good consultant, how's the saying go? You have a good attorney, you can get out of jail. I mean, it would happen either way. There is no difference there. Where the difference lies is in the amount of intensity in the footprint based on the zoning controls that the difference in what's allowed on the site. That's where the difference lies. It's not in how the critical areas rules could be manipulated or how the protection that is granted to the property. It really is in the question of, is it appropriate to put, and this, if you recall back in December of 2024, we had this exact conversation. And the question really is it appropriate to put additional density immediately adjacent to critical areas? And the answer that the then council came up with was, it's okay. Let's 50% of the property is encumbered. Let's try to split the difference. And if you recall in a prior presentation, we presented the numbers of parcels in the city, and we looked at the difference between 0%, 20%, 50%, 100%. And we have that slide if you want to look at it again. However, the conclusion that we came to in that prior conversation was that it doesn't change how the critical areas are applied, or excuse me, the critical areas protections are applied.
David, how long have you been here at the city?
Going on 11 years.
11 years. So have you ever, do you know or can you recall of any time other than a reasonable use exception that an attorney and a consultant got someone out of any of our regulations?
I'm happy to weigh in. So a reasonable use exception is not the only way that our critical areas regulations could potentially be revised. There are other ways. Our code does allow, like so many jurisdictions' codes allow for mitigation sequencing. So there can be different ways that buffers, for example, can be reduced. Again, there are provisions in our code. One would have to comply with the code. And sometimes, frankly, it does help an applicant to have a good attorney and a good consultant to make sure that they are not only complying with our code, but also perhaps able to reduce setbacks or in other ways comply with our code, protect the environment, and basically avail themselves of provisions in our code that can allow for changes, again, based on either geotechnical consultants or other consultants' reports supporting what they're trying to propose to do.
Right, but that doesn't mean that they're getting out, that they're not following our code.
That's correct. I would say that in any event, they have to comply with our code as written.
So they're still complying with our code. So if we feel that our protections aren't strong enough, maybe that's where we need to go, but nobody's using a lawyer to get out of complying with our code.
If we could move on to the next council member here. Okay.
Right
Council
in the middle of
member
our discussion.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yeah, can you clarify or just add a little bit more information on floor to area ratio? I mean, from what the deputy is talking about, it sounds like she's implying that people can just build right up to the edge of the property, and we have made those changes where you can't, and your home can only be 50% of the lot, correct?
That's correct. So we have, as compared to when I started working here, where we basically had an adopted King County code with some minor patches made to it, where we had 5-foot setbacks and unlimited FAR and very limited restrictions on grading and building heights. We are in a very different place now as a community. Builders don't like it. it's challenging. It's also really difficult for us to review because we have many more requirements that we have to account for in design. So critical areas are protected by buffers. They're also protected by structure setbacks from the buffers. Then in addition to that, there are limitations on the amount of hardscape that somebody could have on their property. Typically it's 40% hardscape for the buildable area. Then there are also limitations on the amount of impervious surface. Stormwater is quite complex to deal with. There are limitations on tree removal. Typically for the R4 zone, it's 35% tree retention. So if you're doing a development in the R4, not in the erosion hazard area, you need to retain 35% of the trees. If you're in the erosion hazard, it's 50% of the trees. All of the trees in critical areas and their buffers need to be retained. So that's another layer of protection that's there. So when you start to stack up all of the requirements, these are things that our staff take very seriously. It doesn't mean there aren't misfires on occasion. Absolutely, I'm not going to deny that. These are pretty challenging projects that we face when we're dealing with all these layered requirements. But that is the protection that is, or I guess the zoning controls that generally shape the envelope and the form of development that goes onto a property.
Okay, thank you. In short, you're saying that we have really good environmental controls, and since we became a city, they've become much more stringent.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think you guys know a little bit about this topic. So let me ask you this: it's been 50% prior, right? Isn't that the existing rule? So two-part question: how did that work? Did that do what we thought it would do? And then I see that this is the Planning Commission's recommendation. What is the staff's recommendation?
So where we started with this back in 2024 was a new process where we thought that, with middle housing coming into play, with the need to have some additional capacity to, we heard about it tonight again, provide some market affordable housing and to try to find some appropriate locations where rezones might be easily achieved, to have a rezone process that is accessible to the average property owner, that doesn't require that you go hire a land use attorney to get a rezone done or a professional planner to petition the council to change your land use designation and all those things, which are quite costly. So making it accessible to the average property owner in the community. And the original proposal that we came up with back in 2024 was that rezones, these quasi-judicial criteria-based quasi-judicial rezones, which are hearing examiner decisions, would be eligible if you would be eligible if you had, if you're only going up one zone, if you were adjacent to a zone of higher intensity. We had a conversation about this, about the surrounding cities as well. So if you're on the border of Issaquah and there's an equivalent zone of higher intensity across the road, you'd be eligible to rezone up as well. Those were all part of the conversations in December of 2024. If you have demonstrated water and sewer availability through the water and sewer comprehensive plans for the relevant utility purveyor, we have many areas in this city that are on septic that are not going to receive sewer, and we don't want to be rezoning those areas then only to find that they can't achieve their development because they're on septic. So that was one of the ideas there. We also added in there that you would not be eligible if you had any critical areas on the property. And the reason why we said that at the time was not because we don't believe that our critical areas protections are adequate. It was because this is a new process, and this is something that we're embarking on, hopefully for the long term, and that we want to get right. And we felt like there were many properties, if you could go to the slide, in the city that were eligible to be rezoned that didn't have, but wetlands and streams and slopes on them, and that we could see some rezoning happen in the city on properties and try out the new process. And over time, we could turn that dial if we wanted to, and we could start to add some properties. Maybe we add some additional allowance for critical areas to be rezoned. And ultimately, the discussion that we had at that time with the commission and with the council resulted in us saying, yeah, 50%, we're going to split the difference. We think 50% is a reasonable amount of available, you're unencumbered 50% of your property. That's a reasonable amount of developable area. We have good critical areas protections. That's where we landed. So our recommendation on this is I feel to stay the course with the 50%. Because it represents a compromise. It represents, if you looked at the number of areas or the number of lots that are available, it's 176 parcels in the city would be eligible. Somebody has to want to do it. And there is still enough of a developable area available to allow you to develop on the property with a reasonable sized development, as opposed to a much smaller development if you were rezoning a property that, say, only had 10% of the property available. So it took up a lot of time. I'm sorry, I'll stop there.
No, that's exactly what I was asking about. And then maybe the follow-up, if I may. The Planning Commission, though, came up with 0. And I know you were there and influencing, but that's where they landed. How did that fit with this logic?
My understanding is that if it, and Evan can add in anything here, is that their interest was in trying to find some additional capacity for housing in the city to help drive down the cost, help make some additional land available for middle housing particularly, that could result in some market affordable units being brought online in order to address many of the comments we hear and I've heard over the years about not having any options on the market for somebody who maybe wants to move their kids to move back to the city, or somebody to downsize in retirement, or looking for other market affordable units that might be made available here in the city.
Councilmember Treen.
So David, so let's just, critical area, we constitute that as a wetland as well. That would be a critical area.
The critical areas that are identified in the criteria are wetlands, streams, and slopes.
So the wetlands, depending on the classification or category of the wetland, we have also know that developers have mitigated that and pretty much filled it in.
There was an older allowance in the code that's no longer there regarding the filling of isolated wetlands smaller than 2,500 square feet, I think.
So, thank you. So, because here's my concern is, I have 2 concerns, and I think, but you've addressed the first one, because I think that comes to quality of life and character. Like if I have if a 5-acre lot were to redevelop, even on a steep slope, landslide hazard, but an acre of it or 2 acres of it is buildable, if I can put 14 houses on it, or 12, or even 8, or 8 structures, dwelling units, how big is that? And then it's next door to a single family home. That's still an R4, but a single family home. So you have this unintended consequences of middle housing going into these 229 parcels that you just showed us a slide of. And so if you did 100%, you see what I'm saying? So I think that was the point of your first comment, is that, yeah, if we allowed this even at 50%, 20%, it's still could have the effect that the character of that particular neighborhood or area would drastically change. And so, once the domino falls on one of them, it's not hard to see, even in Sammamish, where then the next parcel, then the next parcel. And it's because it's a market driven, And as soon as it sees that it's profitable, someone else is going to come in and do it. So I appreciate that that's one of the things that we as a council need to address or at least consider. But the second one is, I think where Deputy Mayor Treen is headed, is the unintended consequences of development in these difficult, I believe you called them, difficult areas, where some of the even people in this attendance here tonight would tell us that if you don't address these issues, look what you can do to the downstream people by building on the upslope of it. So we're a plateau, and we have, I mean, I was just talking to an Eagle Scout and showing her our map over here, and it's when you see all the green area, that's the steep slope. And so if we're going to allow people, even if it's 129 or 176, building in those areas, I think we have a duty then to make sure that whatever is being built there is not challengeable. And here's my last point, because you and I have had this conversation over the last 6 years. Our code has conflicts. And I'm going to guess that we still have conflict in our code. And if that's the case, when we walk into the hearing examiners, because we say we want the best built environment here, along with the best natural environment in this area, if I can't get that as a council member, then, and the unintended consequence is something that I don't want to talk about, right? Then as a council, it's our duty then to provide solid code that can win in court.
So I would argue that we do have that with critical areas. We have updated those. I would argue that our town center code is a good example of what you're describing. It absolutely does need to be overhauled, and we are working on that. I feel that our zoning controls, that our newer zoning controls, our middle housing rules, our developers don't like them. They're very difficult. And we have a group of staff that are dedicated to, committed to applying them and are very good at that. Now, there are creative developers that come up with ideas that sometimes are able to find a loophole in something. That's why we come back and we have this docket open. We can come back and make those changes really quickly so it doesn't become a problem. I feel like compared to the past where we've been described as variances are us or other things, we are not that anymore. And we have put a lot of work into turning the corner with regard to our critical areas rules, our zoning controls, our permit process, and staff training, and the quality of staff that we hire and that we retain. And I don't see that happening. So I have a little bit of a different vision of this, in that I feel like if we implement our rules as they're written, we will get the product that we want as they're written, but the product is different from R1 to R4 to R6. However, the critical areas rules are the same across the board.
Then you're ready to go to open public meeting. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Just to finish up on the last conversation, just to make sure I heard clearly, is that there are different ways that people can be compliant with our code, but we do not have any sort of top-of-mind examples where anyone with a good consultant and a good lawyer has been able to not comply with our code. Is that fair to say?
I will say that permits issued,
yes,
that's the case. We have had some bad performing developers that have not followed the plans that were approved, and it has resulted in some impacts that we've had to address. That's the same with all cities. It's not unique to Sammamish. There are some contractors that tend to do what they want, and we are constantly working to address the impacts that they cause in the community.
Okay, but we didn't let them off from following the rules.
We did not.
Okay. Excellent. And then I also heard you say that we don't allow filling in wetlands anymore, and steep slopes are critical areas, so they would not be able to be built on anyway.
That's correct.
Okay, excellent. And then the one question I think that Councilmember Boyer asked that you didn't have time to answer was, based on what we've had since December of 2024, how's it going so far? Have we seen any right? I think you asked that. Do we think it's working? Have we not seen any examples, so we don't know?
Right. So there we have 5 rezones there that have been in process at some point. We have 3 that have been granted approval by the city's hearings examiner through the quasi-judicial process. One of the rezones was, I'd say all but one of the rezones have been promoted by the actual property owners who are the applicants. One of the rezones was by someone who recently purchased the property or was under contract to purchase it as a developer. The first one that was approved, I'd say, is probably the most controversial. The second one that was approved was not controversial at all, and I'd say it was fairly straightforward and was done by a group of property owners who did it themselves. The third one that was just approved was right down the road here on 4th, and varying perspectives on that one. But that one, you might argue, was appropriate. R1, right next to the town center, right on a brand new road the city built. There's differing perspectives on that. The challenging ones are the ones primarily where there would be a lot of change. And neighbors, I think, largely are responding to the notion that there is change possibly occurring next door that they don't have any control over. And I completely understand that, and my sympathy is there. However, the thing to remember is that those properties could have developed anyway. It would have been maybe a different form, whether it's R4, R1, R6, R8, but it would have developed anyway. There could have been trees removed anyway. There could have been roads built anyway. And that is something I think that is overlooked sometimes when community members are commenting on these projects, is that it's not a green belt. It's not a no-build zone. And this is simply a change that's occurring, and they're reacting to a change in their environment that they don't necessarily want, and I understand that.
But it's probably not been enough time to see any of those rezones developed on, so we wouldn't.
We have not received a development application for any of the properties where there is a rezone.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm going to jump in here with a question. We'll get to the rest here. Are there properties right now, someone who wants to, are you aware of anybody who wants to rezone that's precluded from doing so because of our current code? Are we solving a problem at this moment?
I've not heard that. Actually, there was one. There was one property for one of the ones that was recently approved that was a group of property owners. One person dropped out because their property didn't independently meet the criteria because of the critical areas encumbrance. It was 55% on their property, so they were not able to pursue it.
Okay, so by nature of how the line was drawn, had it been drawn 10 feet over, they could have theoretically,
And this is the argument that the Planning Commission came across was, so if my property happens to have the way the line is drawn and my property boundary is drawn 55%, and your property happens to have 48%, you get to rezone, but I don't. This is the debate, that the exact debate that the commission had, and why they landed where they did, is that it's kind of moot. That it really, we're drawing an arbitrary line that it affects some people, it affects people disproportionately, and we should let our critical areas rules do their job. That was what their conversation led to.
Yeah, it's about where I kind of fall, is that the point of protection is at the building permit, site development, not at what the number on the map is. And if we've got an issue with our current protections for those areas, then that's the point where we should solve it, and not on the zoning map. I get the concerns residents have about the upzone in those areas and the perceived impact that it might have. So I think it's important that we communicate to the residents the protections that actually exist in relation to this change, so that there's not a lot of unknowns there. That would be my one ask, is that if this change does end up going through, that we make it very clear how these locations are still protected by our existing critical areas.
I think that producing a user guide that could go along with public noticing that would help inform neighbors about the process, about what a rezone is, about the zoning controls that are in place, about the critical areas rules that are in place, about the development process, and understanding that if this gets approved, it doesn't mean that an excavator is going to show up next week. It means that there are still years ahead in permit process, additional comment periods, environmental analysis, zoning control review, all those types of things. And producing that sort of user guide that can go along with the notice of application for a rezone would likely be very helpful to community members. It may not address the concern that comes out of the fear of change.
You can't solve that for us. Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I appreciate you allowing me to have another comment related to this. First of all, I'm not accusing you of wrongdoing. I just have seen the reports that come in, the staff report, and then the report from a consultant who counters that with other information, and therefore they get what they want. So it's not a violation of anything, it's just the process of development. I wanted to point out that if we have 176 parcels that could potentially be impacted by the 50%, if they were going from R1 to R4 and all of those developments went for the maximum number of units, that's 2,112 units. So you have, that's our entire growth target. So the character of our community is going to be changed by middle housing, and the more we allow the higher the numbers that we allow, the harder it's going to be, because 176 parcels isn't that many, and they're the last of the large parcels that are difficult to build or don't have access, like you said, don't have sewer, don't have road access, whatever. So it isn't fear of change. It's not wanting change. They're not afraid. We know what is coming, and we no longer have design criteria allowed. We no longer have the ability to address compatibility with adjacent development. We no longer require green belts to buffer between different uses. So many changes have taken place that used to create livable communities. And this one, the middle housing one, we have just begun to see the impact. And I'm sorry that the Planning Commission has recommended we rely on our sensitive areas as a way to control it, because that really doesn't control the number of units. So it'll control the buildable land, which affects the number of units, but we've still got a lot of units to come that way. And we don't know how it's going to work out. So, and I really just wanted you to know I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong in the department. I know our permit people work very hard, and they're not easy decisions. So,
Councilmember Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start off with a comment to my peers here that I really appreciate the discourse. It's really helpful I know it's taking some time, but I gotta say, I wish we would do this more often and get this out there. So sorry, Mr. Mayor, if this is taking too much time, so I'll speed up. I do want to be careful and not be capricious about this, and I'm fearful of that. And I truly do appreciate your counsel from the both of you. I really want to say that. What's confusing to me is that I was of the position that the critical area ordinances and the zoning controls would do their job and things would be okay. But your recommendation is to stay the course at 50%. And to the deputy mayor's point, that doesn't control the number of units, that just controls that land use. I know how we ended up with a 50%, and so staying the course, what makes you land on that position instead of just letting the critical area ordinances and zoning controls just do their job? And again, I truly appreciate your counsel, and I do want to understand what brings you to that position.
For me, it is, having worked here for almost 11 years now and having heard the community conversations and how they've evolved over the years, is the precautionary principle. This is a big new process for the city, and wanting to make sure that we are moving into this, wading into this slowly. We always have the ability, if it's working out well and we're not, as developments start to come online and we start to see some of those changes occur, that we could turn the dial to zero. It is a lot harder once it gets to zero to turn it back to 50. And we don't have a lack of capacity in the city. We have adequate capacity currently to meet our housing goals. But what we do have a challenge with is seeing meaningful middle housing move forward. So wanting to try to send the right message to the middle housing builders that we really want you to build middle housing. We have so far had 0 applications for middle housing in the city in the year and a half it's been on the books. So I think that is a really good data point. Most often it is because they can't quite make the geometry work, or if they only could get that property next door and make it work. There's multiple reasons why. Tree retention is usually the biggest one, is why they can't make the project work. So from my perspective, the reason why where I stand on that is I firmly believe that our critical areas rules are very robust and they do their job. I firmly believe that our zoning controls for either the underlying residential zones or the middle housing overlay do their job. They're really well crafted. They have some loopholes. We're working on that. We have a docket. We'll fix those. However, where I stand is I'm very protective of this community in the 11 years I've been here. I have a lot of things to balance, and I want to be very careful as we move forward with these types of changes in the community. And I feel like this is a good compromise for us to try out this process, control the number of units or lots that are available, and we can over time choose to turn that dial. Quite simply, it's a matter of changing a number or striking a line in the code.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Councilmember Boyer, thank you for your questions. And David, thank you for that. It's rare when I sit here that I have my opinion changed. So you've definitely given me something to think about. And when you say that about staying the course of 50%, that gives me cause to pause and kind of think over where I was going. So I'm certainly thinking of rethinking where I'm at on topic 1, and maybe considering leaving it at 50% right now.
Councilmember Stewart.
It's also true, though, that a big reason why we may not be seeing middle housing is that most of our neighborhoods have HOAs, and most of those HOAs prevent that from happening, correct?
That's correct. Yep. We think 80% of the buildable area in the city is encumbered by some form of covenant and HOA that precludes middle housing from happening.
Right. So even in some of these cases where a zoning change may occur, it may not go from, R1 where you can build one house to R4 where now you're building 12, because it's probably at best going to go to 4. And if there are critical areas, which we're talking about, it will be less than that.
Right, and the number that you saw on the slide also reflects a reduction based on where we believe the HOA covenants to be. So we understand that you can't rezone those neighborhoods also. Right. There are some neighborhoods that have not every, what's really wonderful is that every single subdivision has different covenants.
Isn't that great?
So you have to read them very carefully to understand exactly what they say and what
Yeah.
the restrictions are.
Okay, and the only reason I asked for that clarity is because, we haven't seen any applications. We know that some of these bills have been in place for over a year, but then there were also some new bills. So I do think everyone's trying to digest this. And I guess my concern is that we're not seeing applications, and that is concerning, right? We know that the housing crisis is only getting worse. Interest rates are staying high. They may even go up, which is going to make housing even harder for people. So I have a lot of concerns, right, that we aren't seeing any production of middle housing, which makes me think we need to start turning some dials. And maybe this isn't the right dial, but I feel like if we haven't seen any applications for middle housing, then our codes are too strict somewhere. And I'm not saying to damage our environment in any way, but I'm saying that let's protect the environment, but let's also adjust some of those other dials so that we can start to see something. Because obviously something's not balancing out.
And interestingly, the next topic is one of those dials. However, there are others such, the biggest one that I hear, the two biggest ones that I hear from builders are, well, three. The top three, we'll put it there, are tree retention, stormwater, public works standards.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I feel as though if we were to move off of this topic, Evan, if you could go to the recommendation from the Planning Commission, I feel as though you would walk away not knowing what in the world we were thinking. I think it's important that the council take a vote on whether or not to move this forward to a public hearing so that the staff can get clear direction on that. So if someone is interested in making a motion, I would certainly entertain that, or I can do it. I have my light on. Oh, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I move that we move the Planning Commission's recommendation forward to a public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Stewart, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think that it's worth having the public discussion and hearing how this goes. I do appreciate the cautious approach, but I do also feel that, if we're not seeing anything, is it partially, like you said, one of the examples you actually gave was geometry, and if they could just get that parcel next door, right? And could this be some of those where we could see a little bit of middle housing? And I think to the mayor's point about education, I think one of the things we need to educate people more on is what middle housing is, because I think it sounds scary because nobody really knows what it is, and most middle housing isn't really scary. It's actually quite lovely. And I would love to have some middle housing neighbors if we could make that work. So I'd like to see what we get in terms of public response by going to a public hearing. Thank you.
I don't see any other lights on. I'll speak to my thoughts because I didn't convey them before. Clearly, I was just asking some questions. I appreciate what Councilmember O'Farrell said about changing your mind. When I came in here this afternoon, I thought I'd be thinking one way. I'm going to be opposed to us pushing this forward. David, I think you made a good point about being conservative in our approach or not moving too quickly. We can always adjust this later. And I think that's something we can do. We're not solving a big problem presented to us. So I think it'd be better if we slowed down. There's been a ton of changes that have taken place recently, and not making this change right now, I think, is the better course for the city, from my perspective. Councilmember Tree.
Carrie Sands, my question's for you. Could we amend this to add the 50%, or would that change the initial motion? Because I would make an amendment to the motion.
If I may, 50% is where we're at right now. So there would be effectively no change. So voting it down would have the same effect as making an amendment to 50%, because then we'd be...
Thank you for that clarification. I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Okay. I do not see any other lights on. Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion fails 5-2. Okay, so helpful. Great. Okay, we have another.
Like the next motion would be that, well, I guess we don't bring it back for public hearing.
Yeah.
This item would not come back for.
So can you bring the code amendment up? So there is one small change in item DE, I guess, subject property. So we'll bundle that with the next one because we have to fix that word.
Gotcha. Okay.
Nothing's ever easy.
All right, now on to topic 2. This one deals with the exemptions from the city's inclusionary affordable housing program and the fee in lieu requirements. As a reminder, the current program requires that 10% of all new housing be affordable, and it provides some options of how that's met, either building a unit on site or paying a fee in lieu. The fee in lieu is for those fractional units, and currently units up to or under 1,500 square feet are exempt from the program. And this was ultimately put in place as a tool within the city's toolkit for realizing more affordable housing, smaller market rate affordable housing. On April 14th, the council provided pretty detailed policy questions for the Planning Commission. Should the exemptions from the affordable housing fee in lieu program, should that base exemption be increased from 1,500 to 1,750 square feet? Should we consider certain types of additions, like for aging in place, reasonable accommodations, be exempt? Should there be one-time exemptions at certain sizes? And should we allow for exemptions in instances of a term the Planning Commission coined of involuntary reconstruction after structural loss due to an act of nature or fire? The Commission spent quite a majority of their time over those 2 meetings discussing this topic. We have about 5 hours of video I can send you if you're interested. And after considering multiple different approaches, they landed on really focusing in on 4 scenarios. And those are multiple new unit development for sale, like a developer scenario. Then the next would be single unit development on a single lot, thinking of a family moving to Sammamish wanting to build a home to live in. Then the scenario of additions or expansions or tear downs and rebuilds. And then finally, those involuntary rebuilds. The recommendations the Commission provided was for that first scenario of multiple unit development to increase the total floor area limit per unit up to 1,750 square feet. They then bundled the new single unit development, additions, expansions, and tear down rebuilds into one group where the total floor area exemption would be increased to 3,000 square feet. Any new floor area above 3,000 square feet would be subject to the fee in lieu. And then for those involuntary rebuilds, they would recommend exempting those regardless of the size at which they're rebuilt. So here's just the capture of the red line changes based on the Commission's recommendations. We came up with this graphic to kind of demonstrate a continuum of development. So over on the left, we, kind of the lowest impact scenarios, rebuilding a unit that was lost, or a home remodel that doesn't add space, that would be in the fully exempt category. Then that middle ground, the Commission felt, that's where we would increase the exemption up to 3,000 square feet. That would be for additions, tear down rebuilds that add new space, or those existing, those new construction on an existing lot. And then finally, at the right, we get a bit more restrictive with the multiplication of units, and lowering that exemption threshold to 1,750 square feet. So the council direction we're looking for here is, do you agree with the Planning Commission in that involuntary rebuild should be exempt at any size, that new single unit development on an existing lot, additions or tear down and rebuilds should be exempt up to 3,000 square feet, and that multiple unit development, including middle housing, should be exempt up to 1,750 square feet? And I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council, if we could take these one at a time because they can quickly get confused with each other. So talking first about involuntary rebuilds should be exempt at any size. Councilmember Boyer.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the rebuilds, involuntary rebuilds, act of God, those things, I would support having those completely exempt from fees.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Yeah, I concur. I feel the same way.
Councilmember Trine.
I concur.
Deputy Mayor.
I concur as well.
Councilmember Lamb.
So I just want to clarify, so if a 3,000 square foot home needs to rebuild, they would be exempt at 3,000 square feet, right?
The commission's intention is that if in that scenario, 3,000 square foot home burns down, you rebuild and you choose to add 500 square feet, that 500 square feet would also be exempt, up to any size.
So they could rebuild, so let's say 3,000 square foot needs to be rebuilt, they could rebuild at 6,000 square feet.
Assuming that they could do that on the lot with, the other limitations that David described earlier, FAR, hardscape, et cetera. Yeah, they could build up to, I can't remember what you said, 6,000 square feet without paying a fee. Yep.
So I disagree with this statement. Involuntary rebuild should only be at 1-for-1. For what they lost, they can rebuild a replacement 1-for-1.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I have a couple other questions. So even if they had a 1,500 square foot home, they could rebuild it any size. So that means that we could have had a previously affordable home that now could be even more. I guess my other question, though, is if somebody had a home and they rebuild it and it's bigger, does that new value of that home get to increase our levy amount? Does that count as like a new unit being built, and so our levy amount goes up? Because as I understand it, our property tax levy is the same. So let's say our levy is $1 million. Next year, if we take the 1%, it's 1 million plus 100,000, right? Or is that right? Yeah, 1,100,000. And then you can add on to that any new build. So that 1 million could get increased if there was a new house built. So if there was a new house built, then that million would go up, right? So that 1,100,000 would go up by the new house. But if this is an existing house that gets rebuilt, would that go into that levy assessment, that total value of levy assessment?
I'm going to take an attempt, if it's okay with the council, answering this question. So I do believe that the way the property tax works is new construction is added. And I think that that's a totally different consideration than what is before council with regard to the affordable fee in lieu. Like those are different things.
Well, they are. It's just that I'm just concerned that like there will now be housing that's built that we won't be able to get the appropriate assessment on from a tax perspective if we create this sort of unlimited space here.
So the commission had a similar conversation.
Okay.
And where they landed on this was that this might happen in a bad year 2 or 3 times in that year, but in an average year, 0 times or 1 time.
That was my other question, is how often do we see this?
It's such a low volume.
Okay.
And someone is in such a state of shock in their life at that point in time, the commission felt like you give them a pass.
Okay. That was my other question, was how often does it happen? Thank you.
I agree with the commission's recommendation here. I think, did we hit everybody on that one? Michael? Okay, so I think you've had 5 that fully support and then 1 opposed and then 1 somewhat there. Or someone not there, however they, okay. On to the next item, new single unit development on an existing lot, additions and tear down / rebuild should be exempt up to 3,000 square feet. Councilmember Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope I have the right one. This is a single private build, raw land build, right? Okay. I would apply the fee for any square footage over 1,750. I say that because it's defensible. We've got our fee in lieu program going. We want to encourage middle housing. it might be prohibitive for someone to build a 10,000 square foot home, but I figure if they're going to do that, I'm not sure if FEMA would stop them. My only hesitation is I'm not sure if 1750 is the right number. The only reason I choose that is, again, by your counsel, David, you said, and Evan, you said that the master builders had that as a number where they could start to do that, right? Speaking with other council members, specifically Councilmember Stewart recommended maybe 2,000. Now I'm just grabbing numbers out of the air because I have no reason to say anything different than 1750 because that was your counsel. But that's what I would move forward with, is applying the fee for the square footage over 1750, unless I'm convinced otherwise for that number. Thank you.
And is that for new construction?
Yeah, that's for new single unit development on an existing lot. But you've got additions, tear downs, rebuilds. I don't know about
the graphic.
Yeah.
So based on this continuum
yeah.
here, so a lot of this pivots around how you define new development. And everybody defines it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the multiples.
Okay.
Yeah, not.
I'm talking about just, in this case, just vacant lot, new home.
And single owner.
Single owner.
Single owner.
Single owner, vacant lot, new home.
Vacant lot, yeah. And let's see, where is that on your, I think that's.
It's right on the edge of, it's on the right side of exempt up to 3,000.
Yeah.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, in chatting with Councilmember Boyer earlier today, he convinced me that we really should look at the new single-family home development separate from maybe the additions and tear downs and rebuilds. So I would recommend that we kind of split those up. So looking at single-family home, I concur with Councilmember Boyer, possibly for different reasons, but it seems inappropriate to have a different size for multifamily and single family, because I think, again, when we look at unintended consequences, it feels like the unintended consequences, we will encourage people to build single family homes and discourage them to build the multifamily. So for me, I feel like that number should be the same. And so for that reason, I would pick 1750. Now, in our conversations, I could be convinced that 1750, especially based on the previous conversation from a dialing perspective, is 1750 even the right? Right now we have 1500, so maybe we go to 1750 as a next step. But as I recall from master builders, 1750 was their minimum that they felt they could build and achieve something. So I'm willing to negotiate that number, but I do think it should be the same number. I don't think we should be giving preferential treatment to single family homes, because in reality, we should, for environmental reasons, for city cost reasons, as well as affordability reasons, we should be encouraging multifamily over single family, especially given that 85% of our existing stock is also already single family. So I would definitely say we should make those be the same. So a new house. I don't know that we can say just a single lot, single owner. Like, I don't know that we can get into who owns it. But I think that we can say for single family homes, you're exempt up to the same number as a multifamily.
So we put together this alternative graphic. Mm-hmm. And this shows another possible path forward. Mm-hmm. Based on some feedback we heard from different council members. So this shows in a model where you basically pin new development at a tear down rebuild, when you tear out the foundation and everything and it's a rebuild, not a remodel, not an addition. Mm-hmm. So you would exempt everything on the left, which would be involuntary reconstruction, a home remodel, which is not adding space, a home remodel and addition, which is new space. You would exempt that. And then on the other side is where you're considering it new development. And that is, one of the reasons for that is that's the point where a builder, whoever they are, homeowner, builder, has the opportunity to design a home a certain way. Mm-hmm. And they can take advantage of some of our other flexibilities. One of the things that conversations I've had with homeowners is that if you design your home, so say you have a vacant lot and you want to build, under today's rules, 1,500 square foot exemption, and you want to build a 4,500 square foot home, and you built 3 floors of 1,500 square feet, and you made them so they were forward compatible with being individual units, you're now building forward compatible housing stock that is diverse and flexible. You can put a kitchen or kitchenette on each floor, make the units communicate with each other, and you have now a home you can use for a big family. Or as your family ages out and gets smaller, you could rent one of those units out. Or if you wanted to rent all 3 of the units separately, you could do that as well. And what that does is it provides diverse housing stock for the city that we really need, and provides housing options. And instead of paying the city a fee in lieu, you've now built a home that is forward compatible, made a little more investment in it, it's worth a little more, and you didn't pay the city. So we've had those conversations, and we've seen a few projects come through where they've done that, and they're successful in doing it. In order to get there, we have to intercept them early enough in the process and make sure they're aware of that alternative. So that's one of the tricks.
Excellent. Thank you, David. So I gather, based on this, that you are not opposed to what we're discussing here about the single-family home.
No, and from one of the reasons that Councilmember Boyer said, it keeps the program intact, it's defensible. There are many reasons. My primary interest is that we keep the program intact because of this thing called the Housing Accountability Act, and this other thing about compliance and the Department of Commerce, and this other case that came out of Mercer Island recently. I have a lot of concern. And one of the things we're trying to do is to keep our program intact, but find the right size for the community.
Excellent. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, first of all, I know they're not here to see this except one member, but we really do owe a debt of gratitude to the Planning Commission for the amount of work they've done on this. And I almost feel guilty if we don't just adopt their recommendations because of that. But how does this affect, we're allowed now on a single family lot to actually put 3 parcels or 3 separate buildings. How would this be applied to, let's say we wanted to build a second house on an existing lot?
Right, good question. It's a common question we're getting now. Is it would apply in that if your home was larger than today, it applies at 1,500 square feet. So if you're proposing to build a home over 1,500 square feet, then you would end up paying a fee in lieu on the total square footage. So if you were building a 2,000 square foot home on your property, you would be paying, was it $69,000 to the city in a fee in lieu.
So your existing home counts as square footage, and then everything you build bigger than that.
Separate building, separate unit. It's on a per unit basis.
Yeah. Oh, it would be. So if you built a 1,750 or 1,500, it would be
You'd be
zero.
exempt. Yep.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yep.
I just was wondering because that's another thing we're trying to do is get people to build duplex or triplex or multiple small homes.
This is a key tool in trying to achieve that, because what it does is it disrupts land economics, and it redirects builders towards building, instead of a 5,500 square foot home, they might build a triplex. And be exempt from paying the fee. Whereas with the 5,500 square foot home, they pay the fee. And we are seeing that there is, it's in some of the brokers that I've met with that are running models on potential middle housing developments, this plays a big role in their decision making.
Yeah, it's a big number. Yeah, thanks.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, David. This was going to be my question, but now that you've kind of reconfigured the slide, my biggest concern about this, and I think we've received, Council, some emails from our residents, is how this affects individual homeowners who want to expand their home to accommodate a growing family or multi-generational. People want to stay in their homes, but they want to add an extra bedroom, and then they're now subjected to a fee that we would also subject a developer to. So I like that we have the home remodel in there as exempt, so that we don't have single single property owners being subjected to these rather large fees that then makes their project just not, they can't make that work for them. So I think people who are trying to make their existing homes and add on a space, making them exempt from those fees, I would be really supportive of that. Because I think that what that does is it also ensures our housing stock. It helps our current residents continue to live here. When we're all, feeling the economic squeeze about our growing bills on a monthly basis. So anything that we can do to help our residents who want to expand the footprint of their house to accommodate grandparents moving in with them, or their 20-somethings are coming home to live because they can't afford a house, and so that everybody can stay in Sammamish, I really support that they would be exempt from those kinds of the fee in lieu.
Thank you. That was the other. Yeah.
Councilmember Lamb.
So I support expanding the total floor area exemption from 1,500 to 1,750. I think we heard from master builders that that would give them some flexibility and it would still keep our home sizes smaller. I believe our initial policy when discussion to send to Planning Commission was to allow a one-time addition that is no more than 15% of the size of the existing dwelling up to 400 square feet. Did Planning Commission consider that? Because somehow it came back to exempting up to 3,000.
Yes, they did. The commission initially did not agree. Any one of the members of the commission had a completely different perspective of the one next to them. And it took them a long conversation to narrow that down. I think some of the perspectives of the commissioners who, they've had different life stories to get to their position on the commission, and they all have different perceptions about the size of homes and how big a home needs to be. And the commission particularly found that the 1750 exemption, that 1750 was the size of units that we wanted to see being built in the city, not anything bigger, because then we start to get into more luxury homes and those kind of things. And we really want to fill that niche of 1750 and below. So that's where they landed on that. With regard to the home additions, this was a very challenging one, and they did hear a lot from the community during the process, and they really debated whether we should be trying to manage, do a one-time addition, and how do you manage that? How do you keep track of that? What if somebody buys the house and then wants to do it themselves to adapt it to their needs? They can't do it. It's not even, because what if your house is 2,000 square feet and mine is 5,000 square feet? So what they ended up doing was coming up with a cap at 3,000 square feet that they felt could be universally applied. And anybody who wanted to make a home addition in order to accommodate their needs up to 3,000 square feet would be exempt. So if you already had 3,000 square feet and you're wanting to do an addition, well, then you would pay the fee. But for somebody whose home was 2,000 square feet, they'd have 1,000 square feet to work with to sort of get them up into that home size that was considered to be an across-the-board average where they wanted to land.
Okay. So I guess I disagree with that. I disagree with Planning Commission's recommendation, and I took a look at some numbers on the King County Regional Housing Dashboard just to compare our city with other cities and just our city in general. We have 22,000 housing units in our city, and 82% of those units can only be afforded by people that are making 100 plus AMI. So our homes are expensive. 56% of our homes have 4 or more bedrooms. So our homes are large. The majority of our homes are large. They're expensive and they're large. And between the years of 2019 and 2024, we have built 0 affordable housing units. We may have added 3 more with Brownstones West, but that's in the single digits. So our home prices are not affordable. The majority of our homes have 4 or more bedrooms, and we are not building affordable units. And I think in allowing a 3,000 square foot exemption will only exacerbate this problem. That we are contributing to more larger homes, making them more unaffordable. I listened to the Planning Commission, and they believe that we're penalizing people. I completely disagree. I think we're favoring people who have houses, and we are penalizing people. We're penalizing renters in Sammamish who may want to stay in the community, and they can't afford it because now the smaller units just don't exist. They've all become like 3,000 square foot homes. We're penalizing people that work in Sammamish but can't afford to stay in Sammamish because, again, there's no smaller units again. We're penalizing seniors who want to downsize, and these smaller units have now all of a sudden become larger. I think that you mentioned in the meeting Crossroads, in the Lake Hills area, and I'm pretty familiar with that area. That area was built in the 60s, and a lot of them are ramblers. They're older, and now if you go into that neighborhood, so many of them have been torn down, and what was an 1,800 square foot home is now a 3,000 plus square foot house. So I think that, by allowing people to exempt 3,000 square feet will only contribute to larger homes being built in Sammamish where we just don't have enough. I took a look at the home sales currently in Sammamish. There's 283 homes for sale, and only 5 of them were under $1 million. And those 5 were 1,800 square feet. So, somebody could still afford a less than $1 million house, maybe. There were 800,000. But, if somebody buys those homes and they're like, oh, I'm going to buy it because it's cheap, I'm going to tear it down, and I'm going to build a 3,000 square foot. So that number just doesn't work for me. I support keeping it at 1,750 and doing that 400 square foot exemption, no more than 15% of the size of the house. I think we have a huge issue here in Sammamish that we continually to allow larger homes being built and allowing people to just keep on building larger homes and favoring people who own those homes. That is completely housing inequality to me and housing inequity for the people that can't afford to buy a home or who don't live in a house. Sorry if it sounded like I took it out on you. I did not mean to. But do you understand? Is it clear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do understand that, and we have had many of those conversations internally. We've had those conversations at the regional level, and in fact, some of our housing strategies are around retention of existing housing stock. And that is the King County countywide planning policies level. Those are also policies that are in that document. Yeah. I will say, just anecdotally, that for us with this program, the biggest pain point at the permit center is home additions. Mm-hmm. Absolutely is. And when people see that price on the home addition and what it costs, we've had people cancel applications, walk away from it. And that's where one of the comments we've also, I'm not trying to rebut what you're saying, I'm trying to provide some additional comment that we've heard, is one of the commenters at the Planning Commission came and talked about the middle and how he feels like when he bought his house, he didn't have a family. He now has a family. And he's one of his in fact, he thought he got rid of his son to college, only to find out that after college, the son moved back home. And now they're trying to build some space for the son to live in, and they can't afford to do it. But they can't afford to sell their house and buy another one because of interest rates and because of home prices, and they feel trapped. So they don't know what to do, and those are the types of stories that we hear at the permit center. It is a very challenging topic for us.
It is. I don't disagree with that, which is why I support the 400 square foot exemption that allows for people that are aging in place as well. But I do strongly believe in preserving the small homes that we have, and so that we don't become an area where even more large single family homes that are more than $1 million, well, they already are more than $1 million, but again, I just want to make sure we preserve what we have.
Councilmember Tree.
Thank you, Planning Commission. Thanks, David, Evan. Yeah, so for someone who doesn't even believe that the fee in lieu is a good idea, I would eliminate the program if I had the votes, but I don't. So for someone like me who's sitting here and I've been listening intently and had kind of thought out, okay, besides just voting no for the reasons I just stated, what would be someone like, what is staff's perspective then on what is the best option for the city going forward pertaining to this fee in lieu? Because I like both of them. Okay, I don't like either one of them. That's the truth. Okay, but I'm looking at both of them and I just see the advantages for both of them. And I lean towards the one you're showing right now on the screen. But that's only because the other one that's a little twist, right? You're throwing a different ending to me, and I'm like, oh, wait a second. So what's the unintended consequence? You get what I'm saying? So where would be the best place for me to land to say, hey, I don't support the idea of a fee in lieu because I think it makes it so we don't get affordable housing, period, because it costs more money. And I'm doing the math here, and I'm looking at, yeah, it's $1 million, 900,000 for 17. So really you need the 1,500 number to make it affordable. Heck, it needed to be 1,000 square feet for it to be affordable for most people at $500,000. But I also know you can't build anything in Sammamish for $500,000 just for the material and labor. So affordability, that's kind of like, that's another issue, right? All right, my time is up. So the question is, how would you advise me to vote on this issue? Would you go with option 2, topic 2, option 1 is the one I see, or option 2?
So I go back to what our objectives are as staff, right? Keep the program whole. We want to make sure that we have a functional program because we want to avoid getting hauled in front of the Growth Management's hearings board. Don't want to do that. That's very expensive. I don't think any of you would enjoy that either. The second one is, we want to disrupt land economics for new construction and try to persuade people who are demolishing, rebuilding, building on vacant, or building in multiple units in development to build different product than what's being built today. That's another one. We want to try to address the pain point at the permit center and residents who are challenged by their ability to to adjust their space to reflect their life needs. I also understand the perspective of trying to protect existing housing stock because it's some of the only remaining affordable housing, not even affordable, but as close as you're going to get to it, housing in the city. So in trying to split the difference, where I go to is, how do you define new development? And when we originally started down this program, the intent was that we would capture the benefit of, as we heard a public comment earlier today in the public comment period, we would capture the value of the up zone that was basically being given through middle housing, through the additional units that are allowed, and that if somebody is allowed to build more, then maybe they should pay the fee. Whether or not they take advantage of it's their own choice. So I tend to steer back to this here, which tries to split the difference. It doesn't address what Councilmember Lamb was saying. I completely understand that. I'm not trying to diminish that. I'm trying to split the difference here. And where I land is basically that Involuntary reconstruction is exempt, period, because it'd be like one of those a year, and you're in a crisis in your life. Home remodel where you're not adding new space is exempt. A home remodel where you're adding new space is exempt, no matter the size. Maybe that's where you could fine tune that and put a cap on it. I don't know. But then where you start to make the program really work, and this is where somebody has a choice in what they're building, and that is tear down, rebuild, no new space. You're tearing down your house and rebuilding it, you got to pay the fee. Tear down, rebuild plus new space, you pay the fee. Unless you're able to design the tear down, rebuild in a way that is 2 units, then you don't have to, because now you've got forward compatible, life cycle, adaptable housing that we're bringing to the city. The tear down, rebuild plus, you'd pay the fee over $1,750 unless you're designing it again to be forward compatible with life cycle needs. And that is possible. It's quite easy to actually build a duplex on 2 floors or a triplex, as long as you're thoughtful in how to do it. And that's the time to do it, because your architect's designing it. And then we get into existing vacant lot, new construction, same thing. That's when you have the choice to design it a certain way. You want to build it at 5,000 square feet, you pay the fee. Existing vacant lot, new construction, this is where we get into middle housing units, multiple units, you pay the fee. That's where we start to really get into production. Then we get into subdivisions and unit lot divisions, and you pay the fee over $1,750. And what this does is it addresses the challenge we're having with homeowners who feel trapped and have some needs to change their space. But it also tips in favor of the program when somebody tears down their house and rebuilds it, because they have a choice at that point to design it a certain way and to participate either in the affordable housing program or in providing housing stock to the city that is meaningful to our future.
Thank you, David.
Councilmember Boyer.
Thank you, guys. What you have on the screen is, I think, what I sent you earlier, which is what I would support, except for this. If you look at the existing vacant lot, new construction, middle housing, and then the subdivision, I'm going to call those multiples. You guys talked about, and David, you put an idea out there that I just had no idea around, if it's multiples, have 1750 as an average of that grouping. I find that very interesting because, as you stated, that you could have the builder do some things that are very unusual. Like you could get a 1,000 square foot and something bigger, but on average, you would have 1750. And so if you look at that builder with those multiples doing that, it seems to be very appropriate for the program. It gives us some product variability that is really interesting. And then it gives us affordability. I think that kind of clicks all those boxes. I'm also supportive of the home remodel edition fully exempt, mainly because of, if I want to stay out of a orange jumpsuit, I really think that essential nexus and rough proportionality are things, right? And we want to meet the program, so I don't want to have that up against us, because those people are not upzoning. There's no bonus density. There's no change of use. It just seems like an unfair extraction at that point. It's all taking and no giving because of that, and it's not compatible with the program. So I think that you have that in the category that I would support. And then again, I had a discussion with Councilmember Stewart earlier around what's the likelihood of somebody having a 2,000 square foot and adding another 10,000. I don't know how likely that is. I think the FAR kind of gets you in trouble there too. But that being said, I would start here, and if it went out of control, then we could turn one of the dials that you guys are talking about. So my position would be this, but do the multiples with an average of 1750. Does that make sense? I mean, it was your idea, so. Claire?
That makes sense, and
Okay.
it did come from master builders.
But I heard it from you, so.
Yep. Wanted to give them credit for it.
Thank you.
So, Councilmember O'Farrell, have you had a chance to go in this round yet? Okay, if I could, I'd like to jump in. I like this slide you've put together here. I think this is a good way to go. I do like the average in exploring that a little bit more and understanding it. I think I like that. The area I have the most concern is the home remodel / addition under fully exempt. And my concern is on flippers who come in and buy a house that would have been affordable. My home is 1,450 square feet. Someone could come in and add a significant amount of space there, theoretically, and it's no longer within the affordable range. Is it possible to add a schedule? They have to own the house for X number of years before they would be able to build a fully exempt home remodel. Otherwise, it falls under the other side. Because that's really my only concern with the home remodel / addition. The addition element of the home remodel is that flippers come in, add 500 to 1,000 square feet, and take what would have been a home that was on the market in the affordable range, and it no longer is that.
So is it doable? I would say it probably is doable. Is it something that's easy to administer? It'd be extremely challenging to administer from my perspective. Just looking through commonly property ownership records and seeing how property ownership occurs, would you then be saying if you did a quitclaim deed to your spouse, then who owns it? I mean, I'm not trying to be unreasonable. I'm just that's an easy example because I just did one of those. But how do you manage that? Somebody forms an LLC. They want to change the LLC. We see that frequently. The ownership thing is really challenging. We've had some big challenges with shoreline permits and ownership, where we had one builder who would come to the hearings with the hearing examiner for shoreline variances and show up with his pregnant wife once, and then the next time he had a child in arms. And each time he was building a house, it was going to be his forever home because it gives you a certain exemption in shoreline permitting. Mm-hmm. So those are the kind of things that we come across. I explained that to the commission. They told me that probably not a big deal. I'm maybe a little more nervous of that because of the cost of implementation and the challenge that goes along with staff trying to get that information and how do you find that? It's another layer. If it was something that you had 3 friends and you wanted to support, we would go look into it. Because I think it's trying to find that difference and that balance about how this works.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, you're right that it can be, I mean, I look at property ownership all the time as I'm doing my insurance stuff, so it can sometimes be a little challenging to decipher. I also don't know how big of a problem it is. How many people are coming and buying a home, flipping it, and then reselling it with higher square footage and taking, so is it a solution in search of a problem?
It does happen. Is it a big problem? I'm not quite sure. I think the bigger problem we have with flippers is those that don't get permits.
Is that they don't get permits?
They don't get permits. One of our biggest volumes of code compliance is home additions that were done without permit and are trying to be sold.
Okay. Well, in the spirit of the last discussion about starting simple and then moving forward, if we find out it's a problem, then I might come back to you and ask how we can do that. But as it stands now, I think this is, I think this is a good way to go. And I think understanding a little bit more about the averaging, it would be intriguing to me. So with that, I'll move on to Councilmember O'Farrell. Councilmember O'Farrell.
I would just wanted to concur with Councilmember Boyer, and I liked everything he had to say, and certainly about the averaging, because I totally identify and I feel for the Planning Commission that you kind of detailed their life experience about buying the house before they got married. Now they have the family, now the 20-somethings are coming back, and now you feel pretty stuck and squeezed. And you're also the generation that's paying for everything. You're paying for the generation below you, and you're paying for the generation above you. So, and you're wondering how you're going to continue to make ends meet. I think that's the scenario in Sammamish where it's a much more immediate situation than flipping houses. I think right now flipping houses maybe not happening because the cost of construction is so high. So I feel for people like that who find themselves in that predicament, and I would really like to help them out and help them stay in their homes and also stay in Sammamish, because this is where they want to be. So I want to make sure we do that. I think the other thing that we're probably not seeing a whole lot of affordable housing being built is interest rates are crazy. And so that is not our purview. we don't get to affect that. And I think we need to do the best we can with our development regulations and our land use. But until interest rates kind of meet that too, we're probably still not going to see a whole lot of that construction happen, unfortunately. Then I just also wanted to take a moment to thank very much the Planning Commission for the diligent work and all the hours that staff and Planning Commission spent on this really important topic, because housing is it's the biggest subject right now, and we need more homes for people. So thank you so much, Planning Commission, for spending all this time. And again, I would like to concur with Councilmember Boyer on how he was kind of looking at the slide, and that's kind of how I see it too. Thank you.
Councilmember Treen. Deputy Mayor Treen.
Yeah, I like this alternative as well. And I'm open to the averaging idea. I think that's actually gives a lot more flexibility. And we would have an even smaller unit if we're averaging out. So my question is how to implement this. And are there people who will be affected by this negatively? And like when we first enacted it, or I wasn't here, but when it was first enacted, people got caught not realizing it was going to be a fee, and they only found out later. What's happening as far as how we implement it?
So we would recommend that as part of the ordinance, with our city attorney's permission, that we include, first of all, a retroactive involuntary reconstruction clause that says that it is retroactive all the way back to the beginning of this program. So anybody who had to pay that or was subject to that fee, it's not due until occupancy. So many of them haven't paid it, but there are a few that have paid it, and we would refund them the money. We would then recommend that any permit that is in process, whether it is under review or is being built, is vested to the code that was in place at the time. Somebody wants to cancel their application and reapply, they could do that. And that any new permit that comes in the door going forward is subject to anything from a home remodel up to that other side there. And we feel that that is fair. You could alternatively direct us to go back and assess all of the applications we've received, whether they're in review, being built, or built and occupied, and adjust the fees based on that, because by and large, it would result in, I believe, some refunds. I don't think there is a scenario here where it results in a higher fee.
Great, thanks for those suggestions. I mean, Carrie's.
This is the first time hearing about this, just FYI. So again, really, I understand what David's saying. This is an attempt at really trying to create, it sounds like, some fairness from the perspective of staff. And so really it's up to whatever we hear from council majority.
We would want to include that in the ordinance. So we could get direction now to include that, or we could come back with a couple options that could be written in at the point of adoption.
That'd be great if you bring it back with your suggestions.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I concur with Councilmember Boyer on these discussions are so helpful. So I hear 3 goals. So first of all, for the new builds and the tear downs and things, I'm completely fine with all of the exempt pieces. Focusing in right now on just the additions, right, where you're adding space. I hear 3 goals from all of my fellow council members, and in speaking with one of the planning commissioners was, 1, we want to allow flexibility for our community, and that's really important. 2, we do want to maintain an existing stock of smaller houses, right? And I'll not say affordable because it's Sammamish, but affordability is relative. They are less expensive full stop, right? A 3,000 square foot home in Sammamish costs about $1.8 million. So when we start letting things go up to 3,000 square feet, that's not affordable for almost anyone at this point in time, especially with interest rates. And then the third one, which Councilmember Boyer and I also discussed and the mayor brought up, are flippers, right? So when I look at that home remodel, we want to try to find a way to achieve all three of those goals. And a couple of them are a little bit contrary to each other, right? Like the whole maintaining the smaller stock, but allowing the flexibility. That's where we get into the challenge. And I know in speaking, in watching some of the Planning Commission and speaking with one of the commissioners, they were looking at the demand, and they felt that the demand was going to make sure that smaller houses were built. And so I went and I did some research on that. And the truth is, the demand for smaller houses is much higher than the demand for larger houses. However, builders aren't building them. And while we're going to try to take care of that on the building side, the best way to have affordable housing is to maintain your existing stock, right? Because that is they're going to be less expensive than even new houses. So looking at all of that, I think there's a middle ground, right? And that's what I'm looking for, is how do we balance all of this? And while before I had proposed the 15%, I do think that for some of the smaller houses, we may want to allow a little more. So I would say that you could expand up to 1,750, because that's the limit that we've put. So we shouldn't restrict anyone smaller than 1,750 from going all the way up to 1,750, or 15%. Whichever is greater. So if you're at 1,600 square feet, 15% might be more, right? That would be more than you're going up to 1,750. And I think that that helps to strike a balance. And part of the research I did, just because, I love numbers, everybody, I was like, well, would that be reasonable? Like if I had a 1,750 square foot home and I could add 15% to it, that would add 262.5 square feet. What could I get for that amount of square footage? Well, in Sammamish, a typical kitchen is anywhere between 150 and 250 square feet. So I could get a decent sized kitchen, and I could also get a pretty decent sized bedrooms. Bedrooms go between 80 and 150 square feet. And for a new primary, that would be between 200 and 350 square feet. So even in a 1,750 square foot home, if I was allowed to add 15%, I could get another bedroom and a kitchen. And I think that that's pretty reasonable, right? That gives people the flexibility. Or if they just needed to add, a little in-law suite and they didn't need, a whole additional kitchen, I think that would give people that amount of space. So I think we do need to put some guardrails to try to ensure we're protecting some of our smaller stock, which is in huge demand. In 2025, 28% of the homes that sold in Sammamish were under 1,750 square feet. 26% were between 1,750 and 2,500. And only 15% were between 2,500 and 3,000. So there is a huge demand for those smaller houses. And so to the best that we can maintain those, but still have that flexibility, I'd like to look at putting some guardrails in place. And I think that would help with the flipper stuff as well. And I guess that then comes back to implementation, and could we do that? I don't know that we could say it's just a one-time thing. I think we just have that rule. It's not a one-time thing. It's just a rule because it's based on the size of the home. So what are your thoughts on that, David? In terms of implementation or practicality?
Unless you chronically like home additions, which I don't think anybody really does, there's some people that do, that wouldn't really be taking advantage of that frequently, right? I mean, are you really going to turn around and remodel again next year?
No, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. I don't think it has to be a one-time thing. I think we just say these are the rules.
Which might make it easier to administer, because it's, for that application, you have to show that you're not exceeding that, right? So I don't think there's a challenge there. The challenge that remains in the three objectives is trying to provide relief to that pain point at the permit center for that person who wants to do 800 square feet when they have a 2,000 square foot house. And, trying to twist ourselves into a pretzel and do all the things. I'm just trying to relay what I hear at the permit center, and what I've heard in other public comments is that is still an area that's not being addressed. You can't make everybody happy. I understand that. Wherever you all land on that topic, I think we've narrowed it down to the home addition, the home remodel / addition is where we.
With new space, right?
With
It's
new
just
space.
it's just the addition. They can
Right.
remodel it all they want to,
Right.
but the adding space. So David, how many permits for remodels have we gotten in the last year or so?
Most of our permit volume is remodels, additions. I will say that you could always do an ADU at 1,000 square feet
Yeah,
and you'd be exempt.
right.
So I want to highlight that.
Exactly.
Depends
I mean,
on, again, how
800
you
square
design
feet,
it.
800 square feet on a 2,000 square foot home. I mean, you could add a primary bedroom, another bedroom, and a whole new kitchen. I mean, that's a big, 800 square feet is a big addition to
You
it.
could do it smaller at a studio ADU as well. and you'd be
Exactly.
exempt.
So I hear you that like somebody who wanted to do an 800 square foot addition to a 2,000 square foot home, they could either design it in a particular way so that they get the exemptions, or they have to do a smaller addition. I think making sure we can allow them, and maybe it's a little bit more than 15%. I don't know. I'm willing to hear those numbers, but I think limiting that so we don't allow those smaller homes to just get turned into bigger ones, and then we have no more small stock. Because while the demand for the small houses exists, the number of small houses we have in the city we only have about 30% of our homes are under 2,500 square feet in the city, even though the demand is really high for that. So I mean, those were estimates that I was able to get. I wasn't able to pull that
I
up.
do also want to highlight that there are other exemptions that are included in here. Units resulting from internal subdivision of existing structures, garage, basement, or similar existing unfinished space conversions. That these are all other exemptions that are included. So it's not so restrictive. And what I'm trying to get at is if somebody were to leverage these exemptions, maybe you do an ADU and you do a basement unfinished space conversion, you're exempt.
Yep.
So, you know, in thinking about that one pain point at the permit center where somebody comes in, the real challenge there is intercepting them early enough in their thought process
Right.
before they engage a whole, you know, cadre of professionals to support their design and spend all that money. That is really where the opportunity is.
Right. So again, it comes to some sort of communication. So I would propose the slide that you had up with the one caveat that we put a few guardrails, not too restrictive, but we put some guardrails there to try to maintain some of that stock, because I want our mayor to be able to add to his house, but I don't want him to take his house from something that could be affordable to lots of people to only affordable to the select few. Sorry, you brought up your home.
About other people too.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, that would be my proposal. Otherwise, and I would like to hear more about that averaging. I think that's fascinating, but I don't feel like I know enough about it yet to say yes. But it sounds like something we should learn about, because it does sound very intriguing. The average 1750 for the multi. Thank you.
So we've got Councilmember Lamb's light still on and no one else after that.
So I would be interested in learning more about the averaging, and I also support what Councilmember Stewart is proposing, the 15%. I think that would allow people to build a little bit more, but I'm looking for the compromise below 3,000. Thanks.
What do you have from us? Like,
So-
how is this conversation going for you?
landing? What you're
Understanding the feedback? Yeah, I feel like what I've heard is a majority leaning towards the scenario we have on screen here. We'd like to provide you more information with what the averaging looks like for the multiple unit scenario Councilmember Boyer described. And then we could, I think there will be further discussion around the addition and if we're going to put a limit on it, as Councilmember Stewart suggested. But I think we can come back with our redlined edits to reflect this scenario, and we can fine tune those last things during the public hearing.
Okay. Is there any objections to the way Evan has relayed that? Councilmember Boyer?
Yeah, no objection. I just would say that the affordability issue, I'm really looking towards this end of the chart as you see it. There you go. in terms of smaller units and affordability, this affordability thing is really curious because, these builders, they're pure capital allocators, right? They're going to go where they can best do that. And so they're going to go to markets with better elasticity. And it's not here. That's why this is happening. However, if you change that side, we might get that to happen. The home remodel, I'm more moved by what Council Member O'Farrell said about people and growing and adding and things like that. I'm not as concerned about the flipper community and all that, and probably that's just from naivete. I just don't know what that would look like. And I think this just is a much more simple view that people can understand and has in totality better consequences, especially when we look at that side for multiples and the averaging of that giving us, I'm really excited about some other smaller options. I have two sons here that probably would be highly likely that they do that as opposed to a 3,000 square foot home that I can't even do. So thank you.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. Before we move on to the third item, I was just hoping that Council could also provide consensus or direction on the timing issues that David brought up for bringing back an ordinance that is, retroactive. Recall the things he talked about. It'd be great to get Council consensus about that.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out. I think you mentioned one and then a few other options.
Yeah, the first would be, which I would recommend, is involuntary reconstruction would be retroactive all the way back to the beginning of the program. And we would go back and sort through those files and refund any monies we collected from those. I think there's one, not a big deal. With regard to the others, I would say that any that are in process, whether they're vested and because you vest at the point of payment of your permit fees for review. So anybody who's vested, whether they're in review or building or occupied, that is what it is. That's just how that works. We commonly change regulations like that. That's part of the process. However, anybody that has a new application from the point after effective date of the ordinance going forward would be participating in the program as outlined in whatever you finally select at the hearing. And that is very clean. It's consistent with how we do other things. The only outlier would be the involuntary reconstruction. And we'd have to craft some language in the ordinance around that. It's a paragraph. It's not terribly complicated. I think Evan could make a start at that. And that'd be that.
Okay, with that, I think we can, Councilmember Stewart.
I was just going to say, I'd love to see that in writing and think on it more and understand what the implications are. I like the idea of it. So if that comes back and we have time to stew on it, I think that would be good. But I can't say yes right now just because I don't feel like I know the details well enough.
Fair enough. That's part of the hearing process.
Yes, there we go. Perfect. Okay.
Go down the line this way. Is there an objection to seeing the options David proposed? Councilmember O'Farrell. No objection. Lamb? Boyer? Okay, so is that great? Okay.
I do have one final question for you that I want to make sure I understand and get on the record. Because it's pretty easy. I'll get through it quickly. So the way we currently apply the in lieu fee is if you're building 1,500 square feet is the exemption. And if you're building anything over 1,500 square feet, so you have a vacant lot, build a new house, 3,000 square feet, you pay the fee on the entire square footage. So I just want clarity on this, and we can talk about it at the next meeting, part of the hearing, but think about this is are we saying when someone's exempt up to 1,750 that they pay, if they're building a 2,000 square foot home, they're only paying the fee on 250 square feet, or are they paying the fee on the full 2,000 square feet? And the way it's currently set up is we want to use this as a lever, a stick, if you will, to get smaller homes being built, which is why we say pay it on the full amount. But that's up to you. I want to make sure you're aware that there are two different ways to do this. One is you pay it anything more than what the exemption is, and the other is that if you pass the exemption, you pay it on the full square footage.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, so question for you, David, because I think when we first implemented this, we talked about this, and the way that the fee was calculated, the assumption was it was on the full size. So I would be willing to go either way. It's just that if we only go on what's over $1,750, it would have to be a higher fee. We'd have to recalculate what that fee would be, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
we've had a lot of questions from permit applicants about that. And that's why I wanted to get it out in the record. You know, we've talked about this. We can come back with a little bit more information on that if you want to, but that is correct.
Okay.
The way the fee model is set up is it's based on the full size.
Right.
The exemption stands up to that amount, but if you build more than that, then you pay it on the full amount. The reason there also is that we're trying to use that as a stick to get to the point of it's a backwards incentive to get you to building a smaller unit, and it
Right.
helps with our disruption of land economics.
Sure, but if marketing it is better, if you say the first 1750 are exempt, and then you pay a fee, and the fee is still the same amount either way, hopefully it still has the same effect, but maybe people feel better with the second one. So I think it's really just a how do you feel, because I would want the math to work out the same, right? If I'm building a 3,000 square foot home, the fee that I pay should be the same no matter how we calculate it. So from my perspective, I don't really care. But if we think it's easier for people to understand or it feels better one way or the other, that's how I would make that decision. Thanks.
Okay, it is 9:39. And I think we have one more to go, plus one more agenda item. So it's an easy one.
Sorry, this
It is the easiest, but famous last words. So, topic 3 is about changing land use policy 10.4 in the comprehensive plan, which currently reads pursue PSRC regional growth center designation. This was something ultimately that should have been removed from the drafting of the comp plan. It was an idea we had early on in the thought that it could help us attract regional transportation dollars. Upon learning more about what the regional growth center is, it's a scale of intensity and development that we aren't, we're not eligible. We won't be that. So we're proposing striking this from the comp plan, actually amending the language. We presented this question to the Planning Commission, and they agreed that yes, the PSRC's regional growth center designation should be removed, and that we should amend the language to read pursue growth in local centers and sub-areas consistent with the future land use map. And ultimately, this is just reiterating kind of the vision for growth that we established in the comp plan. So the commission felt it was appropriate to make this change. This is what staff supports, and this is what the change would look like.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I totally support this and appreciate the recommendation and the clarification. Thank you.
Councilmember Trine.
Yeah, just make sure that it's also stricken anywhere else in the comp plan, because that's not the only place that is mentioned, I believe. You can double check me if I'm wrong, but I think there's another couple other locations, but I figured that's part of the
we'll look.
Scribner. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. I do support it. Thanks.
Councilmember Boyer.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
You're probably right.
Yes, I support this.
Okay, I do as well.
Sorry, you didn't ask me. I support this.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. We managed to do that quickly. Is there anything else you need from us there? All right, perfect. We have one item that was pulled from consent. I want to ask, is there any interest in having a 5-minute recess?
Thanks, guys.
I'll take a 5-minute recess so I can apologize to Audrey for making her stay so late.
Okay, the council will be at recess until 9:46. Council, we are back from recess now. If we could all make our way back up to the dais. Okay, let's put the mic on here and have this conversation. Real quick, we're trying to determine if we need to extend. How quickly do you need this contract approved? Does it need to be approved this week or?
We were planning to have pre-con with the contractor Lakeside this week. We can shift a week. I don't think that would make a huge adjustment to the construction schedule, but we are planning on, our priority was getting Issaquah Pine Lake Road overlay completed before school starts. So the days do matter, but.
So I guess we can, it sounds like it could go either way. So let's see, is there a motion to extend by 15 minutes to end at 10:15?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to extend to 10:15. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, we have the time. Okay, up next is a conversation about an overview of our overlay program and the questions that came up from consent. So, who pulled it from consent? It was Deputy Mayor. If you'd like to kick off the conversation.
Yeah, I have had some feedback from the public, and I want to discuss three things that I can think of right off the top. And one is this opportunity to test our thermal paint option. We're going to be doing these pavement overlays anyway. They're going to get painted. We should not paint them with water-based paint. We should go ahead and paint them with the thermal base so we can start seeing if that is it will actually work for us. So that was, I think, a really good suggestion. And we're there are other things that we would like to be able to do with safety measures on the roads, and it just seems like we're waiting for something else to be decided before we start testing those and doing them. And there's no reason not to just take advantage of the opportunity now with 5 intersections being having overlays to go ahead and input these, the new proposals for how we could better treat our roads. And so I'm talking about paint, the curb separation or curb extrusion or whatever they call it. I discussed this with Audrey a minute ago. What we're doing there to make it safer for bike riders and provide that separation on the road. And then establishing some actual measures for whether or not we are whether the road improvements that we're making in these intersections are actually resulting in improvements in performance, because we don't have any actual standards for, how many times there's been an accident at this intersection and that sort of thing. We don't have, in our goals, we don't have an actual, measurement of what is success for what we're doing, and it seems like this is an opportune time to implement some of that. So I'll pull up from this as well and see if there's other stuff to review, but those were the 3 on mine.
So I would recommend, I apologize, I don't have the project team, the engineering team, or the engineer of record for the project available tonight. But would recommend proceeding with the project as is. It was bid a certain way with bid packages. It is ready to start construction next week. This is an overlay package on 223rd. We are not adding the extruded curbs, but different type of delineation for the pedestrian pathway. It's a delineated pedestrian pathway that we've been working with actually state representatives that work on ADA work and a lot of different safety work with our consulting team and the engineer of record for that particular road. Our crews have already prepped the culvert work for 223rd and replaced those culverts, so we're really literally ready to go on Thursday. Again, trying to complete these repairs for the community before school starts. The arterial network is the perfect time to overlay the road. If I can recall correctly, their overlay scores are in the 50s for those particular arterials, and so this is a perfect window. The local roads that are nearby are right on the edge of further degradation, would require an opportunity to potentially reconstruct the road, which would be a lot more expensive. So it is a great opportunity. We do have a lot of things coming separately to council this fall and next year. In our work plan, we're working on draft performance metrics for council's consideration that would be going forward as part of the TMP update. That would be doing just that, is how do you measure some of the safety measures that would be implemented and their effectiveness, but not necessarily for an overlay project.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Audrey. So I get that we want to do these, and especially for some of these before school. But one question about the painting is we do have contingency in our contract. Could we at least ask what the price differential would be if we wanted to use a different paint and not use reflectors anymore? We've discussed how the reflectors don't last, and they tend to become either dangerous for bicyclists or just trash, right? Just litter. So would that be something we could do without delaying the projects getting started?
Are you referring to the raised pavement markers, the RPMs?
Yeah, the little reflectors. Like if we use the more reflective paint, we don't need those reflectors. Those reflectors are kind of a nightmare.
I appreciate the comments regarding maintenance. Believe me, we scrape them off with our plows, so I do.
That's what I mean. Like we put them down and then we scrape them off, and that seems not smart.
Yeah, I'm unable to answer in terms of what that result would be without an engineering team being able to answer from what standards they need to meet from an engineering and safety perspective with markers and paint and everything else. We would like the opportunity to look holistically at the city's painting and roadway marking program rather than trying it out on a handful of roads where we'd be going from one paint to another paint, which would potentially cause some issues.
So, but how long would it take us before we got to that holistic look at the whole city before we can make any changes? Because I feel like that could take a year or more before we'd even get started on anything like that.
If anything, prior to next year's road marking program, which is typically assessed after the winter season, depending on how the road markings fare over the winter.
So other than these 5 overlay projects, where else might we be striping before then? Anywhere?
I don't have that in front of me. Sorry, we are striping this year, but I don't have that list in front of me tonight. I can send it to council.
Okay, because I know we've talked about those reflectors being a challenge for a long time. And then the other question I have is on the 2 projects on 212 in particular. I know Issaquah Pine Lake has some separation, at least in some parts, not all parts, between. But does Issaquah Pine Lake have any additional separation that they're going to do when they do the overlay? Issaquah Pine Lake Road?
I don't believe so.
223rd would, but.
I don't believe so. I can take a look. I don't think the channelization was changing for that particular road, but I can find out from the project.
And I do know there are large stretches there that have some separation, just not all the way. But on 212th in particular, 212th is scary. And unfortunately, I know that personally because I live just off of 212th. So whenever I bike ride, I have to bike ride on 212th. So particularly along the corridor between Southeast 8th and Southeast 24th. So what is the overlay? The overlays are intersections only. They're not the whole road. What is the overlay for the 2 ones on 212th?
Let's see. Sorry, there was a great map that I think is on our webpage and was in the April presentation to council. And unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me, but they're the segments that they're always based on the pavement condition first. Those particular segments were right in the perfect overlay window. And then we are including a section of 8th right next to 212th. That was kind of a gap that needs to be overlaid.
So is it 8th? Is it on 8th or is it on 212th?
There's a little bit on 8th as well.
Because it's usually like a segment of road, but these were listed as intersections, so that's why I'm a little bit confused, right? Because usually it's like Issaquah Pine Lake Road or Southeast 29th, but these are specifically intersections, so I'm not sure where the actual overlay is going to occur.
Yeah, I will have to get back to you. I apologize.
Because again, if we're going to do any work in those areas, I feel like there's so much more that needs to be done in those areas. There's a stretch along Southeast 8th where Southeast 8th where there's no shoulder, right? There's just the white line, and there have been multiple cars that have ended up in the ditches because if you swerve more than that, 4 inches, you run off the road. So I'm just curious, if we're going to go do the work and overlay that, does it make sense to overlay that, or should we be looking at how we can, do something else there, especially since that leads to several parks, right? And we've talked about those segments as well. And I think some of those segments are actually on the tip to be worked on, yeah?
They are, yes. But that section of road is not in great shape in terms of an asset management perspective, so that needs to be overlaid. It would be very expensive if we waited a lot longer.
Okay, I'd really like more information on those first two before. So could we go forward and get more information on those to see if there's any change requests we'd like to make? I mean, I know that we've already bid it, but change orders happen. Like, we could certainly do that, right?
We could.
It's not ideal, but I don't want to overlay a road that we're going to plan to tear up in a year, right? I mean,
we do work really hard. We have a 5-year no-cut policy on our own roads. So we work with every single developer, with our development review team, with the utilities, with our own capital projects. These were selected so we also wouldn't negatively impact the community with traffic delays, so that we're not sending the community on a constant detour route. So there's a lot that goes into the selection of the roads for the year.
so we don't have any plans to work on Southeast Safe in the next 5 years, is what you're saying?
No, we did have a corridor study planned and a grant that we had applied for that unfortunately we did not receive the grant from PSRC, but that was in the tip. We can consider it still in the 6-year window. At this point, we'll move it further out in the outer years to just begin to complete the study and then design work.
Well, that's disappointing. Well, just because that is just such a dangerous roadway, given that it leads to the Big Rock Park, and we see people along there all the time walking in the roadway because there's no shoulder. Strollers. I'm kind of, I want to be able to move forward with the ones that are set to start and with the Issaquah Pine Lake Road, but I'm not comfortable with moving forward with the two on 212. I don't know where you fall, Deputy Mayor.
Let's get to Councilmember Lamb.
So we've been talking about striping for, I think, a few years now. It seems to keep coming back, especially on the types of materials that we use, and we're using water-based right now, and the deputy mayor talked about thermoplastic. So water-based lasts 1 to 2 years, thermoplastic lasts 5 to 7, and it's more reflective. And I was just reading about something called cold plastic, which is less environmentally, which is more environmentally friendly, and it lasts 10 years. So I would like to see if we are moving forward on some projects that it is appropriate that we do test alternatives, since we've been having this discussion for quite a few years now. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
So if we don't approve these projects, what happens?
Council can consider adding it to the agenda in either hopefully next week or the week after. I can certainly pass along the questions to our engineering team and happy to provide some answers. With any delay that does affect the construction window, I'm not sure, in terms of what our fall is going to look like. And we would need to communicate that with the contractor as well. They work all over and are scheduling jobs as well, so they would need to know.
And I hear what council members are saying about the thermal-based paint and the separation of the bike lanes, and I would agree with all of those. I just think this is, when we're looking at these projects right now, we've got this window. Is this too little, too late? And that this maybe this type of thing and this subject needs to go on our work plan. We need to start working on this. This is important to council. We need to start making some inroads on these subjects. And I hear what Councilmember Stewart is saying about 212, and the footpaths and that kind of thing on the way to Ebright and all those parks, that we're obviously missing sidewalk pieces there. I see a lot of people walking and biking, absolutely. But I just think in terms of this particular project, which is ready to go, and these road surfaces really need to be addressed, I'm concerned about pushing these projects out too far, where things will get too damaged if it's going to be like another year from now before we get to these things, another winter, another windstorm, etc., and the condition of that road surface then. So I would be in favour of moving forward with these projects, but these particular subjects that we've just raised, that we need to start working on them really soon. They really should start to come up on our work plan ASAP. That's kind of what I think. But I think we should kind of move ahead with these projects. They've gone out to bid. We're right here. They're practically in their trucks right now, ready to start work. And I think we should, in my opinion, I think we should let them do that. But we do need to come back very, very soon and address these particular issues.
I've got some questions if we don't do this year, what happens to the roads that are on the list?
There is potential for our own crews to have to do a lot more work over the winter, depending on what type of winter we have. Patching, repairing, pothole repair. Obviously, our PCI won't be elevated, but our comprehensive PCI is okay. The section of Southeast 8th and 223rd and another one of the local roads are kind of right at the lower level of being able to complete an overlay without a lot of additional work. Once we move into a reconstruction, we're looking at stormwater costs as well, especially in 2027. There's new requirements from ecology that we have to add stormwater to some of our projects.
But the time horizon on those before you have to get to reconstruction is how far? In your best.
Kind of depends on. I don't have the detailed review from the engineers of the type of. It depends on the type of cracking, the type of wear, the subgrade, and then the type of winter conditions we may have.
Okay. So I'm asking this because, one, I agree with the conversation that's taking place now, but two, the street fund has $1.375 million that was transferred from the general fund. And my concern is any fiscal issue we deal with relies on the voters approving it, and we need as much runway as we can. So how critical are the roads in question needing to be overlaid? Also in consideration with the way in which that we're doing it, obviously there's concern from council. So I see two issues. One is the way in which we're doing it, and two, until we have a voter approve something that says we have more money to spend, we don't have $1.375 million to transfer from the general fund to the street fund, because we need that money as runway if voters don't approve the first thing we send to them, so that we can, keep this. So that's my concern, is that we're spending money we don't have on roads that I'm not clear need to be done this year.
I do have the PCIs. They do range from a 34 out of 100, and a 40 is usually the lower limit of an overlay, to a 64 on arterial roads. So when we overlaid 228 a few years ago, that was a 55 or 57. They look great when you're driving by at 35, 40 miles an hour, but there's a lot of subsurface cracking. I don't have an answer for you this evening in terms of what a delay would do in terms of the aggregate PCI scores, and those are the PCI scores from 5 years ago. So we can circle back with the scan, the data that's being QA/QC'd right now that was collected over the fall.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
I was just, since it looks like we're maybe going to get a little bit more information, I'm going to throw two other questions on it. One is the loop detectors it looked like it was kind of an option in the contract, but we're not actually doing it. And none of the overlaid projects are on roads that have signals. So what are the loop detectors? What's that part of the project?
Usually, as part of an overlay, they go back and reinstall the detection loops, which are needed for the traffic team to be able to to detect cars and to do their assessment. They identified some traffic loops which were failing, and so this is an opportunity for that same contractor that does that same type of work to replace those failing loops. We've had lots of detection issues at those intersections. So if council approves both bid schedules, this is fairly common to have a bid additive, a Schedule B, and so that is an optional expense that council can consider if they would like to reduce expenses, but just the offset of that is we won't have those replaced detection loops.
So right now, they're scheduled to be replaced, though?
Through this contract.
And do they, like I said, they're not triggering a signal because those intersections aren't signalized. So where, are they just to be able to do traffic counts or just standard maintenance because you're doing the layover, you want to replace them?
My understanding from the traffic team is they've had detection issues at those particular spots, and these would be replacing those with new loops. So I can circle back with more information.
Okay, I just don't understand what they're detecting when there's no signal. So I'm curious about that. And the other one was there was reference in there to making ADA improvements. So it's not just overlay, it's also some improvements. So I just am curious what other improvements are being included in it.
Sure. Typically, we coordinate this program in advance with the ADA barrier removal program. So some of the ADA improvements that are going in, all of the improvements on 223rd will also include ADA accessibility for that delineated pedestrian pathway. I can circle back with the team. I don't believe this includes any curb ramp installations. I think those were already upgraded along that corridor, but I can certainly circle back.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Those are all my questions.
Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, I moved to table the overlay project to date certain of July 14th so we can finish before 10:15 because I have a council report to give. Thank you.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion carries 7-0. And with that, we will move on to...
Actually, I have one thing I'd like to ask the city manager, if possible.
Sure.
Mr. Interim City Manager, if I could be so bold, and I don't know if my fellow council members would support me on this, but we had a project, I don't know if it was the last meeting or a couple meetings ago, where we also talked about some sidewalk improvements, and there are, and not throwing staff under the bus here, but there are, we've had road standards in place for a long time. The staff has been wanting to work on our road standards to revise them because we, for the most part, require complete streets. That doesn't really make sense in many of our roadways. But in the interim, until we can get that work done, we asked the last time that before we do any additional road work, that we have some sort of a conversation so that we can be helping to make sure we're making good decisions in the various segments that we're working on. And so I'm wondering if we could ask that you kind of look ahead at what might be coming from road projects with Audrey to bring to us. Here's what's coming. So to Councilmember Farrell's point, we can have some of these conversations in advance and not at the point of approving contracts, which was the same with the last one. But I feel like some of these things keep coming up over and over again, and I feel like we need to get ahead of it, even if we can't get the entire road standards done, right? So that we can look at the various options and make good decisions that are sound, you know, saving money in the short term and making better long-term financial decisions, like with things like the paint and some of these sidewalk, you know, just having a barrier. Maybe we won't build a sidewalk, but we can still make things safer. So is that something we could ask you to put on your list that hopefully isn't too long since it's only your second day?
If you can get done by 10:15, I'd be glad to.
Talk fast, Councilmember Treen.
This guy.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. We will then move on to council reports, and we'll start down the line. Councilmember O'Farrell. Councilmember Lamb.
I have a solid waste advisory committee meeting. I sent out the agenda to council.
Councilmember Boyer.
Eastside Transportation Partnership on Friday morning.
Councilmember Stewart.
We have an EFR meeting on Thursday, and I will find the agenda and forward it to everyone.
Okay, please get the Councilmember Lamb, myself, or Councilmember Treen comments if you have them on the RFPs that were sent out to you. There were many to look at. There were many long pages, and we will take your considerations as we are scoring. Deputy Mayor.
Pick committee tomorrow night, and I did send the agenda out last week.
Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, meeting with the new city manager tomorrow. I have a briefing with the Kokanee work group, and we're going to have on the 15th, there's a Kokanee, what do I call it, a bake, salmon bake. And so there's 2 members going. So if one other person would like to go to a salmon bake with the Snoqualmie Indian tribe on the 15th, let me know. But we can only take 1 more. I'm also, I'm going to take up my whole 4 minutes. I'm doing on Thursday, the city management recruitment committee is meeting, so we need your feedback. I'm also doing the budget session on Thursday, and then EF&R is also on Thursday. And next week on Thursday, since I'm on Thursday, I've got the Wire 8 Salmon Recovery. I'll be headed to that meeting. And don't forget the Lewis Thompson completion on Wednesday the 15th as well. And then if you didn't go to the 4th of July event, I did want to thank all the Parks Department people for the wonderful event. It was spectacular. So, and I don't know if that's overselling it, but it was a really good event. Appreciated everyone who showed up. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Also wanted to recognize Parks and Rec. Everything I heard, fabulous in terms of particularly the cleanup and the effort that they put in during the event. I'd probably expand that to also include your public works, your fire and police personnel that were also putting in the extra time. Thank you with respect to, counselors making time to meet with me for one-on-ones, also, coming in related to the budget, conversations. Those will continue into next week, tomorrow and, next week, and granted me some time Thursday to go have a little procedure done so I can hear you a little bit better. That's what I'm understanding I'm supposed to be doing Thursday. Also, in your inbox, I think Mayor and Councilor Stewart and Councilor Treen, kind of a fire coordination meeting with the 3 of you, just to kind of sounds like there's a potentially significant item. Just making sure we're all on the same page, how we, have that transparency back to the full board. And, I think, I'm not sure what the date of that was, that Tuesday or Thursday. Anyway, it's next week that, put a time together and a suggested agenda sent out to you guys for that. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And if there is nothing else, then I will take a motion. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second, moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Good work, everybody.
Welcome to Savannah. Welcome to Savannah. See it now. Are you going to,
for sooner rather than later, which I think is going to be important because showing progress on this, I believe Councilmember Stewart brought up the point they had to be measurable.